you for taking the time out of all your busy schedules. Particularly, I want to thank first and foremost the witnesses who are here today. I know we have File 1, Janice T, her form to bring light to this issue. She has lived it. She has a very personal story, as all of our witnesses do. And I think as elected leaders, sometimes we know you have that platform. It doesn't make you more special than anyone else. It just allows you voice to what a lot can't do that. It would have been wonderful, either one of them, but she was not. But she's here today, along with, I want to thank them for having the courage, Senator Gallivan, Senator O'Mara, Senator Helming, as well as all the rest of my colleagues who are participating, not only in the hearings, but in this roundtable. I want to thank my colleague, Minority Leader Barclay from the Assembly. And I just want to remind folks that the point of this, the Senate Democrats unfortunately did not use their full subpoena power in the hearings last week. And as a result of that, we still don't have the full picture and all the answers of what happened. And we're hoping today, by having additional witnesses as part of this roundtable, that we will get a different perspective, a perspective that this isn't just about numbers, that these lives were cut short. And I think it's also important that we understand there are other folks who are in these facilities that if there's a second wave, if there's a resurgence, we need to know what went wrong so that we can have the right policies going forward and we don't repeat the same mistakes. And to do that, we need all the information and all the answers. Did not use their full power to get up. We do not have subpoena power as the minority conferences, but we're hoping to continue to hear from witnesses and encourage our colleagues across the aisle to do the right thing and compel the administration to provide all the data so we have a complete picture and we can make the right policy choices going forward. I know I'm probably cutting out. I apologize. I'm in the car, which is great for Zoom conferences with the internet's connection going in and out. But I want to thank everyone, my colleagues, for holding these roundtables. And I will kick it over, I think, to my colleague in the Assembly, Leader Barclay.
Thank you, Senator Ort, Leader Ort. I can see how fast you're going down that highway. You're going 55, hopefully not too fast. Hopefully everybody can hear me, but as Senator Ort said, I'm Assembly Minority Leader Will Barclay, and on behalf of the whole Assembly Minority Conference, I want to thank you all for participating in today's virtual forum. First, I'd like to applaud the work of the members of the Assembly Republican Conference and their commitment to making this forum possible. And if I may, just let me introduce our rankers on the various committees. For our Health Committee, we've had a leader very strong on this issue, Kevin Byrne. On Aging, who's been no slouch himself, Aging Committee, Jake Ashby. And on the Committee of Oversight, Analysis, Investigation, we're joined by Brian Mankdalo. And thank you guys all for your leadership on this issue. Obviously, I want to also thank my colleague, Senator Minority Leader Rob Ort, and the members of his conference for their collaboration and really the tremendous work they've been doing on this issue. But like the Senator said, most importantly, I want to express my sincere appreciation to all our guests who have graciously and courageously come forward to share their experiences. We are here today to continue the conversation about the impacts of COVID-19 in New York's nursing home and residential care facilities. And frankly, the joint legislative hearings of August 3rd and August 10th, while they are important, I think all of us would agree that they should not be the end of this conversation. We know this. We know that more than 6,500 individuals died in these facilities. The families who suffered and continue to cope with their loss deserve more than rushed testimony from state officials responsible for the COVID-19 response. And although we heard important and informative experiences from witnesses, there's no denying that there were glaring, and I would say glaring omissions from what we should have been provided. Department of Health Commissioner Howard Zucker's testimony was insufficient and it was evasive. He failed to provide basic information, including a complete number of COVID-19 deaths for nursing homes. That seems amazing to me. He didn't answer all the questions from legislators, and he claimed he didn't have the March 25th directive, which mandated nursing homes accept COVID positive patients with him on the April 3rd hearing. And he couldn't provide an answer as to why the order was intentionally removed from the DOH website. So we still need to pursue those answers, and we're going to do that by whatever means necessary. Today, however, we'll hear from individuals who deserve a place and a platform to tell their stories. We promise we're not done listening, and as always, our commitment is to those individuals who have been waiting to be heard. So again, I want to thank all the witnesses and people testifying for being here today. And now I'm going to turn it over to the Assembly Ranking Member on the Health Committee, Kevin Byrne.
Thank you. I want to first start by thanking leaders Ort and Barclay for agreeing to host this forum so we may all continue to listen to important testimony provided from our list of speakers today. I also want to thank the amazing central staff who have helped put this together in such a short time frame. Minority Leader Barclay on the Assembly side already acknowledged many of our ranking members, Ranking Member Ashby and Mengtalo from Aging, Oversight, Analysis, and Investigation. I'm just going to try to briefly run through the list right here that I can see in no particular order are other Assembly members I'd like to acknowledge for logging in to participate today. We have Assemblyman Michael Montesano, Assemblyman Michael Riley, Assemblyman John Sulka, Assembly Minority Leader William Barclay, Assemblywoman Nicole Maliatakis, Assemblywoman Missy Miller, still scrolling through here, Assemblyman Ron Kim, and others may join us later throughout this afternoon. This truly is a nonpartisan issue, and it's important to note that while this is hosted by the Assembly Republican and Senate Republican conferences, both the Democrat and Republican conferences who serve on health, aging, oversight, analysis, and investigation committees were invited to participate. I want to thank all of our colleagues from both chambers who joined us to participate. This may not be a formal legislative hearing in the traditional sense like what we did last week, but it is no less important. We are here virtually for these witnesses to listen to them and learn from them so we can better review, assess, and improve upon our state's response to COVID-19 in nursing homes, assisted living, and long-term care facilities. To keep things running as smoothly as possible, we tried to keep this format in a similar, for this forum, similar to the format of previous legislative hearings, while providing some additional time for opening statements and Q&A if desired. The forum is being live streamed on the Senate Republican Conference's Facebook page, which can be viewed and shared at facebook.com/NYSenateRepubs. So if people would like to share that and view this live, they can do so. Shortly, opening remarks will be permitted by ranking minority members and/or chairs on health, aging, and investigations for up to 3 minutes. Additional opening remarks may be made by other committee members for up to 2 minutes each. We do have a relatively full agenda where we are expecting to listen to approximately 14 different speakers, presently divided into 4 panels on our agenda. Witnesses will be given 5 minutes each to share their individual testimony. Any written testimony provided will be circulated with all participating members via email. Ranking members and chairs will be given 5 minutes, and other committee members will be given 3 minutes for Q&A of each panel. A second round of questioning per panel may be permitted if desired. All participants are entering through our Zoom waiting room. This is another important point. Witnesses will be unmuted in the order they are listed on the agenda. Please note to all of our members that you will receive a prompt on your screen to unmute, and you must respond to that prompt before you will be unmuted. Otherwise, we won't be able to hear you speak. To be recognized for any comments or questions, you must select authority. They were important, but we're not done listening. Through the course of those two hearings, while it was clear we did not hear enough from everybody, we did hear from a large span of people. Some of the testimony was very powerful and personal, and it is my sincere belief that it is those types of stories that will help us advance positive change in our state. Today, we have more witnesses to listen to, some of which were prevented from participating in last week's hearings. I expect that what we hear today will be as important as what we heard last week, and I thank each and every one of them in advance for their willingness to be here. While the Department of Health, I don't believe, responded to our request to attend or participate in this forum, it is my sincere hope that the department and others are still watching and they will learn from what they hear today. With that, I will move to Senator Gallivan for any other opening remarks or introductions that he may have.
Thanks, Assemblyman Byrne. Thank you, Assemblyman, and good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank everybody for being with us. We appreciate everybody's patience as we deal with the technology. I know that the Assemblyman cut out on a couple of things that, as he was going through the so to speak, ground rules. The way that we're set up is that we do have staff that is moderating this, and they actually control everybody's microphone initially, but when it is your turn to speak, they will unmute yours. You have to unmute it on your own end as well. As we move through the different panels, we will alternate back and forth between the Senate and the Assembly. I will keep track of the senators who want to speak or ask questions, and Assemblymember Byrne will keep track of the members of the Assembly. So they just have to raise their hand, raise their hand in that chat room, and we'll keep an eye on it. Or individually, you can text Dawn Harrington or either one of us to let us know. The leaders and Assemblymember Byrne summed it up very well. This is an opportunity to learn more and to try to find out and get to the truth about how coronavirus affected nursing homes and residential care facilities. There was several hearings that were very lengthy over the past several weeks. We know that Commissioner Zucker from the Department of Health was there for only 2 hours on the first hearing. He was evasive in many ways and either refused or sidestepped the many questions that we have. And all of us are very honored to be representatives of the communities that we serve and try to be your voice. And not all your voices were able to be heard over the last several weeks, and hopefully we're providing that opportunity today. So we do appreciate your patience. We appreciate the fact that you're here as we move through this, and you can be assured that we will continue to be speaking up for you on these issues and won't stop till we get to the truth, and hopefully are able to influence the policies so that we can avoid the problems that we face in this particular crisis. So I would like to introduce the other members of the Senate. The ranking member of Aging is Senator Sue Serino. Ranking member of Investigations is Senator Tom O'Mara. We have Senator Patty Ritchie with us, Senator Pam Helming, Senator Phil Boyle. And I do know that we will have other members that will be joining us over the next several hours. Both Assemblymember Byrne and I have the responsibility to keep track of the time as we move through this. And if everybody could just be conscious of that, because we've got a lot to get in a very short period of time. At this point, though, I will ask Senator Sue Serino to say hello and offer any remarks she might have.
Good morning, everyone. My video up? my audio?
You're on.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gallivan. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that's here today and everyone that put this together, but especially to the people that are talking about their loved ones. You've heard me say they didn't have a voice or a choice when it came to having being put in a vulnerable situation, but today you are their voice. So thank you. And I know it's a hard day, but we really appreciate it. So as the ranking member of the Senate's Aging Committee, I went to both hearings with an open mind and a genuine desire to get real answers to improve the state's response to the crisis in these facilities. While we heard some powerful testimony, what we got from the Department of Health and the governor's representative was nothing more than a repeat of the state's basic talking points. Thousands of New Yorkers lost loved ones in residential healthcare facilities and nursing homes, and they deserve answers. The legislature had the opportunity at these hearings to get these answers by leveraging its full power and issuing subpoenas. They chose not to. In choosing not to do that, the legislature, controlled by one political party, showed a blatant disregard for the thousands of grieving families who lost their loved ones. These are real people, not statistics. Their lives matter and their families deserve the opportunity to be heard. That's why we're here today, and that's why we are not going to stop pushing for a nonpartisan, independent investigation. The governor himself said time and again, no one has a right to infect another person, but that basic rule didn't seem to apply when it came to these vulnerable residents. Those who lost loved ones deserve real answers. They deserve accountability. And most importantly, they deserve a better path forward. I thank everyone here today for doing their part to help the state do better in protecting these vulnerable New Yorkers and supporting those who care for them. Thank you.
On the Assembly, we have our ranking member on aging, Assemblyman Jake Ashby, for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you to Leader Barclay and Leader Ort and all of the staff for making this happen. I just want to express my gratitude for all of the witnesses coming forward today. I know that the resolve that you have continuing to come forward despite not having the opportunity earlier and bringing forward your testimony is going to be well received by everyone here today on both sides of the aisle. There's people here representing both sides, and I'm grateful for that. I wish there were more, but I think this is a great opportunity. Even though we've had hearings over the last couple of weeks, it's still incomplete. And I think today we are going to get a more complete picture, and we're going to have the opportunity to utilize the information that we gather today really to pursue justice. And I'm hopeful that's the outcome later on down the road. So thank you all for coming here today and being with us, and I look forward to hearing your testimony.
Senator Tom O'Mara, who is the ranker on investigations.
Thank you, Pat, and thank everybody that helped organize this meeting today, and in particular our witnesses that are here, that are willing to tell your difficult and emotional stories that we're going to hear. And while we heard several of those over the past couple of weeks, we felt it very important to be able to continue and have more of these stories told for the public to see and to learn exactly what's going on. And while the Department of Health Commissioner Zucker was far less than forthcoming and forthright at the hearing that he did agree to testify at, that was not enough. We are not letting go of this issue, and we'll continue to pursue it until we find out what happened and why, to get to the bottom of this. But your stories today will be very helpful for us in our efforts to move forward. And while some of the testimony that we're going to hear today was actually referred to by Senate Democrat leadership as they might not be comfortable with the testimony, too bad. We're here. We want to know the real stories about what's going on, and not the hand-picked ones by the majorities of the Senate and the Assembly, where they avoided many of these more difficult issues. So I do again thank you for all the witnesses to be here. And I look forward to interacting with you.
On the Assembly side, I want to welcome Assemblywoman Marjorie Burns for joining us, and we have opening remarks from the Ranking Member on Oversight, Analysis, and Investigations, Assemblyman Brian Mankdalo.
Thank you, Chairman Byrne, Leader Ort, Leader Bartley, and all of our staff members and everyone on this call. Thank you for taking the time to be here today and giving it and getting it set up. To the individuals who are going to testify today, I give all my thanks to you for being able to be with us, to giving your time, and also the love that you have for your family by testifying here today. And we owe this to you. We owe more to you than just that. As ranker on investigation, it's my job to make sure that we do things right in the Assembly and in Albany, and that's my promise to you. I will listen to each and every one of your remarks and take it to heart, and make sure that justice is done for those families. And also, as we move forward in New York State, if we do have a second wave or something else does happen, we need to make sure that we are well prepared. And I think with the members that we have here today, we're able to push that message forward. We want to reassure you that we will not take this lightly, and we will not take this sitting down, that we will continue to push your message forward to every member of the legislators in Albany. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration, and thank you mostly that you gave your time to allow us to listen to what's affected you and how it's affected your families. And may God give you strength and patience as we hear from each and every one of you today. Thank you.
Senator Patty Ritchie.
Thank you all for being here. I want to say I am so sorry for your loss. This is something that certainly is near and dear to my heart, though my father did not pass away due to the virus in a nursing home. I did lose my father during the middle of all this. I was able to go and visit, drop off medicine, groceries, and visit through the door, but wasn't able until the last week to have any kind of personal contact. So for all of you that were not able to have that, I just can't imagine what you're going through. I am looking forward to hearing your stories and how it affected your family, and making sure that we do everything we can on our end so that no other family has to go through what you're going through right now. Thank you for being here.
I do not see any other raised hands on the Assembly side, but I do note that we were joined by Assemblyman Joe DeStefano. See anything else? With that, Senator Gallivan, if you are ready, maybe we can move to our first panel. I believe panel one will be hearing from Janice Dean, Jennifer Harrison, Joanne Williams, Dorothy Ann Carlone. I didn't mispronounce any of those names. That was pretty simple. And I believe we can start with Mrs. Dean.
Oh, you're not unmuted yet. There
How's
you go.
that? Can you hear
Good.
me?
Yes.
Thank you all for doing this today. And I see some familiar faces, and I am very appreciative of your time. When I heard that New York State was having hearings about the coronavirus nursing home tragedy that took the lives of thousands of seniors, including my husband's parents, I knew I had to try to get my voice heard, to tell the story of my son's grandparents whose deaths may have been prevented. Mickey and Dee Newman were married for 59 years and raised 3 children, Donna, Michael, and Sean. They lived in the same 4-story walk-up apartment in Brooklyn for almost 6 decades. Mickey was in the U.S. Air Force before he met Dee and always talked about how proud he was of his service. He joined the fire department of the city of New York and served for 23 years in the Engine Company 323 in Brooklyn. My husband, Sean, became a firefighter just like his father. Dee was a homemaker and worked part-time in a dentist office in the neighborhood for close to 20 years. She was a devoted mother and a grandmother. With their health declining over the last few years, Mickey and Dee were both having a tough time getting up and down the stairs. We tried many times to persuade them to move to another place with easier access, but they lived in a rent-controlled building and it was hard to convince them to give that up. We had personal aides come to the apartment, but their health continued to decline. It was apparent that their top floor apartment was no longer an option. So we started to look into assisted living. With Mickey's medical condition and his dementia, it was hard to find a facility close enough, but we were directed to one that agreed to take both parents. Dee was able to move in just before Christmas last year, but Mickey was still not well enough. After yet another trip to the ER, my husband's parents were not any closer to living together in an elder care facility. We prayed that one day Mickey would be well enough to join his wife. This was the first time in their lives they had been apart like this. And then came COVID-19. Mickey's nursing home went into quarantine in mid-March and we could no longer visit. Shortly after the visitor lockdown, someone called to let us know Mickey was being switched to another floor so that the one he was being moved from could be dedicated to new patients. From what I know now, I believe some of those new patients were ones recovering from COVID, thanks to a statewide mandate from Governor Andrew Cuomo. On March 29th, Sean got a call in the late morning, was told that his dad wasn't doing well. This was the first time we heard he was sick. He had a fever and his breathing was labored. 3 hours later, a doctor called to tell us his dad was dead. The doctor said it was likely a result of coronavirus. We only got confirmation when we saw it on the death certificate. It later came to our attention that many nursing home workers, including in my father-in-law's facility, were working in different places, bringing even a greater risk for spreading the virus. Sean had to break the news to his mom that her husband had died, and it was the hardest thing he has ever done. My husband saw his mom once after that. He brought her orchids, condolence cards, and a few pictures of Mickey, but not the front desk. Saw his mom standing 10 feet away with a mask on and told her he loved her. She started to cry before he left. He would never see her again. Before she died, Dee had mentioned that some workers were sick. She also said residents were still going outside for newspapers and coffee without masks on. As family members, we were prohibited to come see Dee for risk of bringing in the virus. But why were the people who lived there coming and going? We've asked those questions and we're told that they could not deny residents of going outside as they pleased, even during a pandemic. A few days later, Dee's health went downhill. She was moved to a hospital. Sean talked to his mom the morning before nurses moved her to a different area in the hospital, and we knew that was not a good sign. She needed more oxygen, her throat was hurting, and she had a cough and a fever. During Sean's last conversation with Dee, the last thing she asked him to do was get Easter gifts for the kids. She asked him, could he put her name on the presents? A nurse called the next day to tell us she was in and out of consciousness, and they gave her more oxygen. A day later, she died. Even though she contracted the virus in an assisted living center, her death was not counted that way because she died in the hospital. There have now been many articles that detail how New York is the only state that doesn't count the number of deaths in the hospital from patients that got coronavirus while in elder care facilities. We still don't have the exact numbers, even though the governor and his health commissioner have been repeatedly asked to report them. Our grief and confusion turned to anger as we learned more about how elder care homes were turned into death traps. Our most vulnerable loved ones could not protect themselves. My family story is not based on politics, as some might have you believe. And apparently my appearance here today makes some people uncomfortable. But I don't think it's me they're uncomfortable with. It's the cover-up and the truth that happened in New York nursing homes. If anyone has the right to feel uncomfortable, it's the thousands of family members who lost loved ones, many who would still be here today if they were better protected at a time when they were most vulnerable. Today, I want to lend my voice to the thousands that have lost their parents and their grandparents. Our loved ones aren't numbers on a curve the governor says he succeeded in flattening. They are real people who lived important lives. Mickey and Dee Newman, born and bred in Brooklyn and the Bronx, respectively, were the definition of what Governor Andrew Cuomo calls New York tough. Even single voice, every single voice from the victims' families deserve to be heard. And I believe it's those stories and those who have experienced the greatest loss in this pandemic that can help us uncover what happened, because we need to learn from this tragedy to make sure it never happens again. And while I appreciate the fact that these hearings are being held in order to get answers and some accountability, ultimately, I believe there needs to be a full bipartisan outside investigation with subpoena power. We need honest answers about why there was an order to put over 6,300 COVID positive patients into nursing homes for 46 days, and why there did not need to be a test for incoming patients prior to admission or readmission. Mr. Cuomo has rejected repeated calls for an independent investigation, saying that doing this would be political. If he has nothing to hide, why would he not welcome any and all investigations with regards to the nursing home tragedy? It wasn't long ago that Governor Cuomo said, quote, "I assume full responsibility, and if you are upset by what we have done, be upset by me." We are still upset. We are outraged. He has never taken responsibility. Instead, he's blamed everyone else and everything else, even at one point, the nursing home residents themselves. The death toll in our senior living facilities in New York alone is bigger than September 11th and Hurricane Katrina combined. This should not be about politics. It's about accountability for what happened to our parents and our grandparents who trusted us to look out for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time here, so we're managing it off the screen, but I know we went a little over, but we're gonna try to move on to our next speaker in this panel, and then we'll go to Q&A. Jennifer Harrison. Is Jennifer Harrison logged on and ready to unmute? Hey, Jennifer,
Yes,
floor is yours.
can you hear me?
Yes.
That was rough. I swore I was gonna be confident and strong and unemotional, but that was rough. My step-grandmother, Teresa Hagemeyer, resided in the Smithtown Center for Rehabilitation for a little over a year. She was 98 years old, would have turned 99 this coming February, and was well on her way to a much-deserved milestone of 100th birthday. Her sister Josephine, Long Island's own Josie the Riveter, lived in the same facility. They were known as Long Island's Homefront Sisters during World War II, were both very healthy, and who knows how long they would have lived had Governor Cuomo not knowingly handed them death sentences with his March 25th directive, forcing unequipped nursing homes to accept COVID-positive patients, all the while preaching to anyone that would listen that this virus would spread like wildfire through the senior citizen community, that they were the most vulnerable and had to be protected by a shutdown that destroyed the economy and many lives. His directive was issued as the Comfort, Javits Center, and Makeshift Treatment Center at Stony Brook University Hospital were also made available, ended up being converted to treat COVID patients, and were barely used. Everyone testifying before you today is doing so because our families were lied to and treated in the most despicable of manners by the very people entrusted with the care of those that took care of us their entire lives. They were the people that gave us life, taught us to ride bikes, or sat us on their knee and told us firsthand accounts of the historical events they lived through. They were the people that built and fought for this country, and they deserved so much more. Although we were unable to advocate for them in their final days, we will not allow their voices to be silenced. The first time my family was notified that Teresa had been treated for COVID was about 2 weeks after the fact, and by complete accident. I got a call from their billing department to notify me of a notice I would be getting regarding her COVID treatment and to basically ignore it. I was caught completely off guard and had to get answers from a billing clerk who had no contact with her, had no medical knowledge or training, and could only tell me by the codes she was reading that Teresa had been treated and seemed to have recovered. I was told she had a 98.6 temperature for a few days and was fine. I immediately called to speak to the floor nurse when I was also told as to how she was doing, that she had recovered, but was receiving additional physical therapy as she was still lethargic. We were relieved. We were also told that her sister Jo, again in the same facility, did not have the virus, but instead was being treated for a urinary tract infection. This turned out to be a lie. To this day, we still do not know if Aunt Jo was ever tested or just left to die, knowing that this killer was lurking in the air she was breathing. We called for days and days to get answers and to FaceTime. Every attempt ignored and brushed off. Aunt Jo died a few days later, and Teresa 2 days after her. After never being told of Teresa or Jo's conditions, not being allowed to advocate for their care, have a simple phone call or FaceTime to let them know that we cared, that they were not alone, and perhaps to say goodbye. We were called at 7:15 p.m. one evening, told that Teresa had died and you have to come get her tonight. Not, I am sorry for your loss, or we will miss her, or do you need help making arrangements? A very cold, short, and nasty, come get her. I guess it shouldn't be shocking considering the way our parents and grandparents were treated in these facilities when no one was around to pay attention, but it doesn't make it any less disgusting, any of it. The March 25th directive never should have been issued. Immunity never should have been given to political donors that treated human beings, again, people that fought for and built this country, like unwanted stray animals. Especially as convicted murderers, rapists, and child abusers were freed, so not to suffer the same fate so many of our national treasures did in nursing homes. Not only were our loved ones handed death sentences and left to die, but we weren't even allowed to send them off with proper funerals or the honor they deserved, as we watched thousands gather in the city to honor a convicted criminal that held a gun to the belly of a pregnant woman. We watched buildings get destroyed, riots and looting take place, and attacks on police officers, all encouraged by the governor that killed an unknown number of nursing home patients by policy and then denied even the dignity of a church service for them. The same governor that refuses to answer our questions or take any responsibility. Well, I am here to say we demand those answers. We demand accountability and we demand reform. This is not going away, Mr. Cuomo, and we are not going anywhere until we get those answers, until we get those reforms, until the people and organizations responsible are held accountable, the necessary reforms are made in nursing homes, and we are ensured the dignified treatment of our family members that worked their entire lives to earn it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next on this panel, we have Joanne Williams. Is Joanne available to unmute?
Yes,
Floor is you, Joanne. Floor is yours, Joanne.
thank you. Good morning, Senate, Republican Assembly, and Candace. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak today on behalf of my father, myself, and my family. I want to first show you a picture. This is what I have left of my father. That's his picture. And that is the urn and the blue butterfly that I see every day in remembrance of him. My father was a resident in a Westchester nursing home. Our family's nightmare started the first week of April when I tried tirelessly to contact the nursing home staff to find out how my father was doing. I had two questions in mind. Is there a protocol in place to protect him from this pandemic? Number one. Number two, in addition to that, is it true that COVID positive patients are now allowed to be admitted into his nursing home? And if so, how are you protecting him from contracting this virus along with you and the rest of the staff? But Unfortunately, I was not able to get any answers because they did not answer my calls. I also have documented emails that I also emailed the social workers, the administration, and again, no emails or responses from them. But then on April 27th, my sister gets a call from the nursing home social worker that my dad was displaying a fever and he was not breathing very well. They then transferred him to the emergency room. My dad was 86 years old. Although he had some health conditions, he was also in a wheelchair, unable to walk. He had slight dementia, which was the hardest decision for us to make, was to place him in a nursing home, but that was the only choice at the time. We were very active in my father's life. I brought my son, his grandson, many visits every week to visit him. We had him on weekends and holidays. We had close contact with the nursing staff, and we were very active in his healthcare and his well-being. Shortly after he was admitted to the emergency room, my sister gets a call from the doctor on staff to tell her that he's not responding to the medication they're trying to give him. My father, mind you, is looking at a person who is in full PPE garment. He's scared, he's nervous, his family is not there to comfort him or to explain to him what's going on. My sister then calls me. I'm his youngest daughter. I'm the person in the family he went to, that everyone goes to for help. And my dad listened to me, always. So she had instructed the nurse to give me a call, and maybe I would be able to tell him to take his medicine. I prayed all night to the Lord. I said, dear God, if you give me just one last chance, I want to see my dad just one last time. God answered my prayer. An hour later, I got the call on a FaceTime. I saw my dad. It wasn't in the best conditions. He was breathing laboriously for breath. But I was able to convince him to take the medicine that the nurse was trying to give him. I knew it was too late, but I still hold on to that moment in prayer that God allowed me to see my dad and to tell him that I loved him one last time. I want to tell everybody that the stigma behind people and elderly in nursing homes, they not all don't have families that love and love them. My father was a great dad, grandfather, uncle, brother, and son. He was a native New Yorker all his life. He worked hard, put us through Catholic school. He was a great provider. My parents divorced when I was 19 years old. My father spiraled downhill from there because he believed in family so much. But we stood beside him all through those years. And I knew he had more life in him left. And his life was short because it was taken from him. This didn't have to happen. And I also want to add that I also emailed the nursing home asking them how come I wasn't given the notice that my father was sick sooner. How come I wasn't given the notice that there was an executive order with positive COVID patients entering into his nursing home, putting him in danger? Why weren't the family members notified of these changes? Why weren't we updated on their conditions? Why were we just ignored? It is our right and responsibility as his family to make those decisions, not the state, not the government. It's the government and the nursing home's responsibility to maintain correspondence and decision-making with family members. And they failed to do that. I not only blame the state, I blame the nursing home, because it's sad that the following day when they got notice that my father passed away, they called us and asked us, when were we going to do, what are they going to have to do with his belongings? And when will we be able to pick them up? Not a word of my condolences to you and your family. Not an answer to my questions once again. I am furious. I cannot grieve properly. I had to bury my father 3 months later with his ashes in our Catholic church. I am saddened every day that I walk by my makeshift memorial with my father's picture and his urn, because my father died in vain, will not die in vain. I have no other words. I just pray and hope that there's laws that are put in place so that this doesn't happen in the future to other vulnerable nursing home residents. It's so unfair. And I will still want answers. I'm not going to stop until I get an answer, an apology to what happened to my dad. He deserves that. He is human. He is somebody's father and grandfather. And he was always loved. Thank you. And my heart goes out to everyone else who's experienced the same.
Thank you, Joanne. Next, the last speaker in this panel is Dorothy Ann Carlone. Is Dorothy on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
Dorothy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We moved my mother to a nursing home near us on December 27th, 2018. I spent the next 442 days caring for her there every day. My husband, Dr. John Carlone, was her personal physician and cared for her in the facility for 15 months with their knowledge and implied consent. He had been her doctor since 1989. She loved him and she did anything he told her to do. He was her Dr. John. My mother had dementia. Her favorite word was no. She would not eat her meals unless I or Dr. Carlone were there encouraging her. On March 11th, the facility approached me with a plan that would allow me to continue to care for her during the upcoming lockdown. They would make me an official volunteer and I would be allowed to continue to feed and care for my mother. They knew she would not eat if I wasn't there to encourage her and help her. The facility gave me a TB test and a flu shot. While I was waiting for permission to go back into the facility, I went there every day and I asked them how mom was doing. Every day for the next 13 days, I was told she was fine and that she was eating and drinking. On March 25th, an employee of the facility sent me a picture of my mother in which she appeared thin and very distressed. I called Gloria Duffy at the Buffalo DOH office the next morning, May 26th, to express my concerns. She asked me why I wasn't in there feeding her. She told me that they had been given an exception to allow me to be in there to feed her and go in as a volunteer. I told her that the Department of Health had also not responded to Dr. Carlone's complaint filed 2 weeks earlier saying he needed to be allowed to continue to care for his patient. She said that Dr. Carlone should immediately file a second complaint, send it directly to her, and that she would forward it to Albany for immediate attention. It was too late. The very next day, on March 27th, we received a call from my mother's nurse telling us to come right away. Dr. Carlone and I drove to the nursing home and found my mother gasping for breath, thin and emaciated, and her arms and legs totally mottled. They tried to tell us it happened fast. That amount of body modeling would have taken hours, which means her body was slowly shutting down and she was probably suffering and dying alone for most of the night, her heart pumping, trying to keep her lungs breathing as she gasped for every breath. As I held her hand while she lay dying, I felt the worst guilt I have ever felt in my life. I had trusted this nursing home to care for her, and I believed them when they told me every day that she was fine and that she was eating. Her body told an entirely different story. I had previously requested hospice for her so she wouldn't die like that, but they said she didn't qualify for hospice. My mother slowly starved to death. Her last hours were painful and she suffered. I can only imagine what the last 2 weeks of her life were like, alone, sitting in her room in her wheelchair, waiting for me to come and care for her as I had done for 442 days. Did she think I didn't care anymore? Was she scared? Did she simply give up thinking no one loved her anymore? As I held her hand when she was dying, suffering and gasping for every breath, I told her I was sorry and that I loved her. She deserved better. No one should ever suffer the way she did. Weight loss during this pandemic has become a huge issue. Why is this happening? Are they not eating because of depression? Or is it the fact that they are accustomed to having their families feed them and they now feel abandoned? Or are their food trays simply left in their room with no one there to assist or encourage them to eat? Do they have the staff to ensure that the residents are able to eat and do eat? This didn't happen before the pandemic, so I doubt if it happens now. This is the reason family assistance is not only helpful, it's vital to the survival of these residents for both their physical and mental health. I have requested that CMS come in and investigate what happened to my mother. Complaints to the New York State Department of Health go nowhere. They have two canned responses. They either tell you that they couldn't find any proof of your allegations, or that there's no proof that any state or federal regulation was violated. Dr. Carlone was denied admittance to the facility on March 12th. He immediately filed a request with the New York State Department of Health asking their assistance to allow him to continue to treat his patient. This request should have been considered immediate jeopardy. Under the Nursing Home Act of 1987, she had the right to choose her personal physician. Based upon court decisions, all patients have a common law right to control the care provided to them, including who renders it. When patients express their preferences for certain providers, their choices must be honored. Federal statutes of the Medicare and Medicaid programs guarantee this right. The facility was wrong to deny my mother the care of her personal physician. I believe if he had been allowed to continue her care, she would still be with us today, singing and smiling. My mother's life mattered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. Our first member who has questions will be Senator Sue Serino, and we would ask any other members, if you have questions, to be sure to raise your hand. Senator Serino.
Thank you very much, Senator Gallivan. And oh my God, your stories have so touched my heart, and I'm sure as everybody else that's listening to you. And it's so important that you guys are all here today, because we are learning so much that the changes that we're going to have to make going forward. And it just points to problem after problem that have plagued these facilities from day one. And of course, we can always say hindsight is 2020, but going forward, and this question is for all four of you, to better protect these residents, what do you think are the most important things that we should know, that we should be doing? What changes, from, especially from a family's member perspective, do you want to see, and what would be at the top of your list?
I think there needs to be better communication. In our case, we weren't getting regular updates at all. Certainly finding out that my father-in-law died suddenly after a 3-hour conversation beforehand saying he was unwell. We weren't getting updates. We need regular updates. I think there were so many things that were handled terribly. I just want all of our stories to matter so that another family doesn't have to go through this. But I think the number one thing has got to be communication. And I don't think there was a lot of communication from anyone, from the nursing home place to the staff, to the higher ups. Yeah, that would be my response.
Thank you, Jen. And that was, I had a conversation with the Department of Health. We had a plan, we had an idea to have grants that would train misplaced workers, because we know that the nursing homes are understaffed. But if you could have a person that's dedicated, or even a couple people dedicated just to talk to the families, was so, so important, but they just ignored it. So, thank you.
No question.
Oh, sorry, Joanne.
Hi. What really bothers me now after the fact is that we're still not getting answers. And it's so obvious that they're hiding something. So what is it going to take for us to get answers either from the nursing home or from the government, the state level, about what happened inside those nursing homes and what didn't happen that should have happened?
Right. And that's when the legislature had the authority to subpoena people to come. There were a lot of top level people that left the Health Department of Health. They left their jobs. So they're not going to be held accountable, right? And they knew that there were things that were done wrong. And that's all you want. You just want
Sorry.
So thank you, Joanne. And I think, Dorothy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I'd like to add that the governor was on TV and he sent letters saying, to doctors, please come out of retirement, please help. We need doctors, we need doctors. Here's my husband, a licensed physician practicing in New York State for over 50 years, who was in that facility almost every single day. He had spent 3 months in their hospice unit with another doctor, feeding him, caring for him, and playing music for him. Everyone in that nursing home knew my husband. And yet on the day of the lockdown, the new owners of that facility who didn't know him said, oh, he's a visitor. Well, he wasn't a visitor. He was her doctor, and they had no right to lock him out. She did everything he would ask her to do. She would still be here if she'd been eating. She stopped eating.
That's terrible, Dorothy. And I come up with an idea too, to have separate specialty care facilities that we spoke to the Department of Health about this. We could have done it, and they chose not to. And I'm sure that all of you would, agree that if we had a separate facility for COVID patients, I know I was getting, as the ranker on aging, I was receiving calls from doctors in facilities that said, they say that there's a COVID wing, but they don't have a locked door. There are people that have dementia. I mean, there were so many things that could have been avoided just by having a specialty care center, and we had the availability that we could have definitely done that. So thank you. I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to add. Thank you all. Oh, sorry,
Joanne?
Oh, can't hear her.
Okay, thank you. Really quickly. No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Now, when the patient of these places that you're talking about, like the Javits Center, the Westchester Camp, the ship, the naval ship, but what about nursing home staff? Now, when something like the pandemic happens like this, they get understaffed for many reasons. Some of them get sick themselves and they have to be out, and there's no replacement. So what about the funding for nursing homes now? Like making it mandatory that the ratio between a patient to nursing home staff is higher. More nursing home staff, I think, is going to be needed in case we're facing a second surge of this, not going forward, or even in the future from this ever happening again. I think that's another playing factor, because I did speak to some nursing home staff from another facility nearby where I live, who said that they were getting sick themselves because they were caring for the residents and the COVID positive patients. And then they became understaffed. And then there was many times when the residents were left alone for hours at a time.
And and that was a big problem. But we had come up with the idea to use $100 million of the CARES Act funding that would supply testing, PPE, pay for the staff. You would have dedicated staff in these specialty care facilities, so they wouldn't be going from facility to facility, and they would be regionally. So we could do that. We had the availability. There would be facilities that would be agreeing to do that. They would get paid more money too, and there is that money in the from the CARES Act. So, but they just didn't listen or even answer anything. Any of the ideas that I came up with, we heard zip, even speaking to them on the phone. So shame on them.
Yes, and shame on the fact that the Governor Cuomo has an act called the Matilda's Law, and that's hypocritical. I'm sorry.
I don't think I think he even said it. I don't think his mother-in-law is ever going to go into a nursing home. So
That's
he
his
has
mother.
no idea.
Yeah. Okay.
I know it's extremely difficult to stay on time here, just because this testimony and these questions are so powerful. I don't think any legislator wants to be the person to interrupt any of these amazing ladies. So we're doing our best. On the assembly side, I'm just going to go quickly, and I know we do have some other questions too. Trying to time myself. Okay, so just to be fair. First, I want to thank you all again for your just unbelievable testimony. It's truly some of the most powerful words I've heard since being elected to this position. And I want to thank you all, because each of your individual stories, I believe, amplifies the stories of others. And it's extremely important that you are heard so we can improve upon our state's policies and learn from any mistakes that were made through the executive branch, through, quite frankly, from any level of government. It's not just about, finger pointing, it's about making sure this doesn't happen again. I do have one question I was planning to ask at least each witness at one point or another. I believe Janice and Dorothy mentioned investigations, the need to further investigate. In New York State, one of our largest budget items is typically Medicaid. State and federal dollars go into that. Medicare is a federally funded program. Both of these programs support a lot of our elderly population and in nursing homes. The federal government has spent a tremendous amount of money and resources to support our state during the peak of this virus. It was mentioned before, the USN Comfort, PPE, the Army Corps of Engineers, medical staff, ventilators. The White House utilized the Defense Production Act. So my question would be is, since there was so much federal involvement, do you believe the federal government should be obligated to further investigate the state's response into nursing homes with COVID-19? And would you also support an independent investigation? So it could be yes for both, it could be yes for one, it could be no, one for either or. But federal, and I believe, Dorothy, you mentioned CMS, and that's why I mentioned you too. But we'll start with Janice, Jennifer, Joanne, either one.
Any and all investigations are welcome. And this didn't just happen in New York State, by the way. There were several other governors that had the same mandate to put COVID positive patients into nursing homes. California, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. All of those governors did exactly the same thing. So I welcome a federal investigation as well.
And I did want to follow up too, just as a matter of courtesy. This has gotten a lot of attention. Have any of you been connected, reached out to you by the executive branch, the governor's office, Department of Health, or Attorney General's office?
Yes.
Yes. You have.
I have.
Okay.
I actually emailed the governor's office asking for answers, and I did get an email sent back with their condolences and that it was unforeseen circumstances. But still, again, it's a family member who lost their father, and I'm looking for more than just that at this point. I want answers as to why this happened, what happened to my father in the nursing home, and what could have been prevented, and what steps was the nursing home taking to protect him, or what resources they had or lacked thereof. So I don't want to put blame on anyone either, but there's always going to be blame for a certain situation, because when you're in a position of and you are responsible for laws and people, of course, there has to be some kind of responsibility. But for me, it's more personal with the nursing home. I was very disappointed. I put my trust in them for many years. I've done a lot for them and my father when he was a resident there, and I got no answers. I didn't get any condolences from them. And I just have this constant picture in my head of what was going on that's really not a good thoughts. And I want answers to that. And I think the only ones that can answer that would be the nursing homes.
Well, I appreciate that. I believe each of you deserve answers. We deserve an accurate count on the total fatalities that were derived from nursing homes throughout this pandemic. And I want to thank you again for your heartfelt testimony. And I'll bring it back over to Senator Gallivan for questions from the Senate.
Dorothy, you could respond to the last question if you wanted.
Okay, what I wanted to say was almost every response from the Department of Health that I have seen, including mine, said they couldn't find any proof. They go in and they read the file at the nursing home and talk to those people. Do you really think they're going to tell you what they did wrong? I doubt it. And when it came to Dr. Carlone's complaint, they claimed they couldn't find any state or federal regulation that was violated by them not allowing him to continue to treat a patient that they had allowed him to treat for 15 months. Now, he was her doctor, and several laws state that she had the right to choose him and have his treatment. Yet they said they weren't able to find the state or federal regulation that was violated. So if they'd like, I could do a little more legal research for them. I have some spare time. but it's very aggravating. And I also talked to someone at the CMS investigation in New York City. His name is Maury Meredith. He told me he was investigating the facility. So I asked him, do you have the 5 Department of Health complaints? And he said, no. And I said, well, how can you do an investigation if you do not have the complaints that were filed? Why aren't you looking at them? Why aren't you reading them? So I'm concerned that even CMS might not do a complete enough investigation. And I do agree with the other people on this panel, including you, that there need to be independent investigations that aren't political. And I thank you, Senator Galvin, for standing behind the residents in your district. We support you 100%, just like we did when you were our sheriff. Thank you.
Thanks, Dory.
You're welcome.
Senator Phil Boyle.
Thank you, Senator Galvin and my colleagues in the legislature, and thank you to these witnesses for your powerful testimony. I represent the 4th Senate District on Long Island, in which where we had many COVID deaths in our nursing homes. One of the things that struck me was during the height of it, I got a phone call from a constituent who said that her father was in a nursing home and that they were bringing COVID positive patients back from the hospital. And to be honest, I didn't believe her. I mean, in this business, we hear a lot of conspiracy theories, shall we say, from constituents. You try and be polite, obviously, professional. And I said, oh, that probably can't be right. But sure enough, during the course of the next 24 hours, we got numerous other phone calls from other people with parents in other nursing homes who said that was exactly what was happening. The thing that struck me was I asked them my staff contacted the Department of Health. They said, well, they're being put in separate wings. And I called them back, the constituents back, and they said, no, that's not true. One person told me, nope, the COVID patient just came back to the hospital walking right down the same hallway that's in the same wing where my father is. And so my question to any of you, and again, I appreciate your testimony very so much. If you know from your personal experience about the separation, and what strikes me is that I hear every day now from restaurant and bar owners in my district saying that the state liquor authority has agents going into their restaurants and bars 2 or 3 times a day. They've deputized people from Children and Family Services, other federal agencies from the state liquor authority to give the violations out to the bars. And I believe if they would have spent 1/100th amount of time enforcing the separations in these nursing homes, the Department of Health would have saved a lot of lives. Do you have any information on the separation or what was going on in the nursing homes if they told you anything like that?
I do have one.
Okay.
That was one question I asked of another resident's family members who got an answer from a nurse that worked in the nursing home where my father was also in. And she stated they were full to capacity, the residents. There was no room for additional patients to come in. So therefore they were placed in the veranda. They called it veranda. Now, when you have a nursing home resident that is wheelchair bound or very frail, sick, they can't be left isolated in their own individual rooms, especially during pandemic. There's not enough staff to go around to watch them. So they put them in this veranda area of the nursing home to watch TV, get recreation. So they're all together. She says they were still doing the same thing they did before the pandemic. That's not following proper protocol for a pandemic. Right. So they weren't isolating these patients. Mm-hmm. They were together with COVID positive patients in a veranda. And a lot of them were taking their mask off. I know for one, my father was probably one of them. So how were they protected? They weren't. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And that's just the type of thing I think we need to hear in a truly independent oversight hearing about this. I thank you all for your testimony so much. And any others that would answer that same question? Okay, just in closing, I think, and one thing I find out in politics is one side is very good at slogans and things to remember. We need something that will be memorable to put the pressure on Governor Cuomo and his administration, whether it's Governor Cuomo, give us the number, a one-line thing that people are going to remember. Give us the number. Give us the number. How many people died in hospitals that we're truly got the virus in nursing homes and we're not accounted for. We're not going to allow the commissioners or anybody else to keep saying, we don't know, because they'll go on forever and make us until we forget about it. They think we're going to forget about it. We never will. Thank you again for your testimony.
Assembly,
Okay, we're going to go a little out of order on the assembly side because we have a colleague from across the aisle, Assemblyman Ron Kim, raise his hand. So I want to go over to Assemblyman Ron Kim.
Thank you, Assemblymember Byrne and my colleagues for organizing this event this morning. When we had the hearings, I appreciate all the tough questions my colleagues on the other side of the aisle brought to these meetings last week. And I know that there are many people who were not included during those hearings, and to give these families an opportunity to come forward, I deeply appreciate these efforts. My question is for Joanne and others as well. I think it was Joanne who mentioned that she wants an apology from the governor. I'm just curious, if the governor calls you today and says, I'm sorry about the March 25th, we made a mistake. I'm sorry about the undercounting of nursing home deaths. We got it wrong, but now we're going to get it right, and we're not going to repeat the same mistakes. Would you forgive the governor if you got that phone call?
I'll answer that.
Okay.
He hasn't taken any accountability at all in the last few months. He's blamed everyone else except himself and the person that signed the order. So I can't imagine, unfortunately, him making a phone call and accepting any kind of responsibility. I've heard him blame Mother Nature, God, Fox News, the New York Post. He conducted an investigation into himself and decided that it was the visitors. We never got to visit, by the way, and the people that worked in the nursing homes. So, had he in the very beginning taken some responsibility for his order and said, you know what, I made a terrible mistake. I was trying to save hospital beds. I was doing my best at the time. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I will do everything I can to make sure that I make good on my promises and get to the bottom of why this happened so it doesn't happen to anyone else. I would have taken that at face value, but he continues to just pass blame and say it's politics, and he doesn't want an independent investigation. So as much as I would like to think that that might happen, I don't think that will ever happen.
And do you think that's something, a minimum, a lot of families are waiting for someone to take accountability and take responsibility and saying, I think, and as you know, I lost a loved one as well. And I also feel like if you just can be honest about what happened,
yes,
and just, because I think we can certainly understand that things were hectic and you're entitled to make mistakes. We're all trying to get through this together, but why would you not own up to that moment? I don't see it as a moment of weakness. I think what's more important is to get this right moving forward. So why do you think that he's unable to do that, or this administration is incapable of doing that?
Because there's a bit of a cover up. We don't have the numbers. They won't give us the numbers. I watched the testimony from the health commissioner. You asked him many, many times in different ways to give you the total number of deaths, including those who died in the nursing homes, rather in the hospitals from the nursing homes. And they won't give the answers. So you have to start with the truth first and giving those answers, and then let's hear an apology. But again, every time the governor or his administration is asked the question about the nursing homes, they pass the blame to everyone else except those who signed the mandate. So yes, I mean, it would be wonderful if all of a sudden he took some responsibility and accountability and we had the actual numbers, and he didn't investigate himself and come up with his hands clean. But I mean, if there is a way that we can find these answers, why wouldn't we do it? And why would he not encourage an outside bipartisan investigation with subpoena power? Because we need to bring these witnesses to the stand to tell the truth.
I have an answer to that question.
Yeah, please,
Dorothy, I think
Joanne.
you're on.
Got about a minute left. Go for it.
Okay. Yes, I personally, like I mentioned before, if I had gotten an apology, even today from the governor, and some sort of plan that he had in place to prevent this from happening again, sure, that would make a big difference for me. But at the same time, I want him to hold the nursing homes accountable so that they know that this cannot happen, that they are responsible for our parents, and that they need to follow the proper protocol, and they need to have everything in place in case of another surge or another pandemic. So I want him to bring light to the situation and say he's apologized, say sorry for what happened. Yes, we were middle pandemic, the unforeseeable happened, and he wasn't prepared, or we weren't prepared, and which is true. But at the same time, hold someone accountable so that this doesn't happen again. Because if they continue to feel protected by the governor, the nursing homes, this will happen again to other nursing home residents. So we can start with an apology, with a plan in place, and for some accountability from the nursing homes.
A public apology. I don't want just him calling.
Oh, no, I meant public.
I want
yes,
a public one.
Right, definitely a public apology.
We're out of time on that round, but thank you, Assemblyman Kim, again for your participation. We have none from the Senate side now, Senator Gallivan. We have a few more left in the Assembly.
Nope, continue with the Assembly.
Okay, we have the ranking member of the Assembly Aging Committee, Jake Ashby.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you to all of the witnesses for your testimony. This is a question for all of you. I'm wondering if because of the involvement here with Medicaid being connected at the federal level as well, I know Assemblyman Byrne had referred to this earlier in calling for an investigation from CMS. I'm wondering if anyone has reached out to their federal representative. If they have, what the response has been, and if they have not, if they would be willing to and call for their action to bring CMS into this. Go ahead, Dorothy.
Okay, I've reached out for the past 2 months. I've sent 2 paragraphs to everyone at CMS. I've reached out to Senator Reid. I've reached out, Congressman Reid and Congressman Solis. I've copied Senator Galvin on my requests. CMS needs to come in. They're the only people that can hold them accountable because of the Medicaid and the Medicare. The New York Department of Health is covering up too much. And these people are not just dying from COVID. My mother died from failure to thrive. Okay, that's because she starved. Another woman who entered the facility where my mother died on March 11th, in 6 weeks, lost 40 pounds, according to the reports. 40 pounds in 6 weeks, and she died in a hospital 6 weeks later. If they're not being fed and they're not eating and they're depressed, it's not a COVID death, it's related, but they don't have the virus. They're just being neglected and experiencing what I consider gross negligence. And then on top of that, they told Vivian Reyes, her mother was fine. They said, your mom's fine, Dory, don't worry about her. And yet I find her thin, emaciated, gasping for breath and dying. No, I'm sorry. They don't tell the truth. And will I ever forgive Governor Cuomo? No. Okay, my father would want me to because he said you should forgive everyone. But no, Governor Cuomo, your actions cost my mother her life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. Janice?
I'll do any and all things to make sure that we get answers. If that's being on the phone or sending emails or writing letters, I will do whatever is required so that we can get some kind of closure, because right now we aren't mourning properly. We weren't able to have funerals or wakes. We weren't able to see our loved ones before they died. So I want to make sure that every family going forward never has to deal with this again.
Thank you. Joanne?
Yeah, there was one little detail that I left out before my testimony of what happened to my father, and that was the diabetic port that was placed in him that we were not aware of or told that was placed. We only were told by the emergency room doctor. So again, this is negligence on the nursing home's part, gross negligence. And I want the governor to hear our stories, take it seriously, put himself in our shoes, okay, and do something about this. Make the nursing homes responsible. Let them answer to us. I want answers, and I'm like everyone else here on this panel. I'm not going to give up until I get an answer. My father deserved that, and so do I.
Thanks, Joanne. Is Jennifer still on? Well, I appreciate all the responses, and I think that if we, have a unified effort here and asking for the federal government's involvement, your testimony is certainly powerful enough to have an impact and bring them into this. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, on the Assembly side, still seeing none from the Senate, we have Assemblywoman Missy Miller.
Thank you so much. First, I first want to say thank you so much to all of you for sharing your stories. It's absolutely heartbreaking and unacceptable. I know that we are all asking for an independent investigation, and the governor's response to that is that he does not believe that there is such a thing, that nobody independently investigating this can be nonpartisan. Who do you think can do this investigation? I think that I believe that it is absolutely 1000% necessary that we need to have somebody step in and take a real hard look at the truth, at what happened here. But who do you think we could have do such an investigation?
The federal government. I'm thinking the federal government maybe needs to come in and speak with the state and come together.
Right.
And find someone bipartisan to do the investigations.
And you don't think that his response would be the federal government, how fond he is of the federal government?
I know, they're playing tit for tat, like they have been for some time.
But
Yeah.
he relied on the federal government to got all of the things that he wanted. He got the comfort ship, he got the Javits Center, he was given ventilators. So, he was okay with getting the help from the federal government when he needed it.
Right.
So why wouldn't
everything for? He's blaming them for New York. He's blaming them for the entire virus being here in this country, but he's blaming them for New York's high numbers, saying that they did not offer enough, they didn't take control, they didn't, to me, yeah, it makes perfect sense, have the federal government, but they will look at it as partisan.
Well, he's going around telling everyone that New York has passed with flying colors. So I'm not sure, what side is he on? He thinks that New York is, New York tough. We conquered that curve. We flattened that curve. New York, so I don't know.
New York is not the same. New York is not the same. And if we want to talk about politics a little bit, what about the bail reform in New York State that was passed? We have criminals roaming the streets committing crimes on and on again. Why? Because maybe there's an overcrowdedness in the jails, Rikers Island. Everything boils down to money and politics, and it's sad. I want this to boil down to my father and all our fathers who died in the nursing home, and it could have been prevented and it wasn't. I want everyone to think about people for a change, our feelings, our hearts, and our loved ones.
Well, and that's the message that we need to say, you are so proud of flattening the curve, and bending the curve at the expense of our parents, our loved ones, our golden riches, our senior population was mistreated and neglected.
Yeah, he likes to show his COVID mountain, but my in-laws' deaths are on that COVID mountain that he proclaims is a New York success story.
We got to move on to our next member. Still, I think we're on the Assembly side. Unless I hear otherwise from my colleague in the Senate, we will move to Assemblyman Mike Riley, who I see has his hand raised for a little bit. For 3 minutes. There you go, Mike.
Thank you, members of the panel, for sharing your stories, and they are very they pull at the heart, and I truly am sorry for everything that you went through and your families are dealing with. One thing that I got out of the back and forth with some of my other colleagues, talking about who may investigate, who do you think it may be? I think part of the problem is that we have a shortfall in that we had the New York State Inspector General's office, who should be on top of this from the beginning. It's not necessarily to see about criminal activity, but efficiency. You know, that's their primary role. And I think we have also a missed opportunity with the Attorney General's office, where they should be taking the lead. And yes, we are fearful of politics playing a role in this, and you and your family should feel that way as well. But let's not take anything out of context here. During the hearing last week, the first hearing, Governor Cuomo decided to do a press conference, and the commissioner of the Department of Health decided to leave. Well, here we are at 11:28, hearing from families who lost their loved ones due to the missteps in nursing homes. And in 2 minutes, Governor Cuomo was holding another press conference. Well, who knows what he's going to talk about, but I know what he should be talking about. He should be talking about the missteps and how we can actually uncover things and find out where we went wrong so we don't make those mistakes again. Now, has anyone from the New York State Inspector General's office or the Attorney General's office reached out to any of you? And this is a question for all the panel members.
No. No one.
No.
No.
Okay. Well, I apologize for that. I know I have really no control over it, and neither do my legislative colleagues here. But I will tell you that that is something that I think we should push forward and make sure that we hold the Inspector General's office accountable too, to make sure that they put out a report after a thorough investigation on the Department of Health's response and oversight of nursing homes. What my colleague Senator Gallatin said before, Senator Boyle said before, that we have SLA investigators going into restaurants. He's absolutely right that why wasn't that done in the first place to inspect nursing homes? I want to thank you for your courage in telling your stories and letting us all hear it. I just wish that the people in the administration would actually listen to you. So thanks again. If you have anything to add, please do, whatever amount of time I have left.
Mr. Riley, we're out of time, but I'm sure other colleagues can raise their hand and lend their time for our panel to make further comments as well. I just want to keep an eye on the clock. Again, on the Assembly side, I see we have Assemblyman John Sulko with his hand raised.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ranker. And I just wanted to visit a situation here that was created out of this pandemic. I mean, we were all kind of on a steep learning curve, but the lockdown. We're all starting to find out now how harmful the lockdowns really were. And to isolate a nursing home resident from their family is obviously going to do a lot more harm than we even would have imagined. And again, I want to just give my condolences. The pain that you must feel must be excruciating, and to be separated from your loved ones when they need you most is just an unimaginable amount of heartache. But would you agree that we need to revisit the lockdown policy, that with personal protection equipment, I'm sure you would all be more than glad to wear if you had to go visit your loved one? Do you think we should revisit that and realize that it's not one size fits all when it comes to applying these kind of policies throughout the state. The nursing homes definitely need to have better consideration. As our group homes, the same thing that happened in our group homes for our loved ones that have disabilities. They were not being allowed to visit with family either. And I'm fearful that the effects in the long run are going to be long lasting. So I would hope that the group here that have suffered these losses would agree that we need to revisit this lockdown policy and let families visit their loved ones.
Oh, I agree 100%.
I agree.
Yeah. My mother died because of the lockdown. Okay. Absolutely. She stopped eating because I wasn't there. And I lost her because of the lockdown and because they didn't let her doctor come in and do what I had been doing. So both instances were wrong. And if they do an investigative panel that's bipartisan and that's independent, I'm sure my husband would be willing to help and serve on
Thank
it as a licensed physician.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, on the Assembly side, I see Assemblyman Brian Mankdalo has his hand raised, ranker of Oversight, Analysis, and Investigations.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. As my counterpart or my fellow assembly member, Assemblyman Riley, was talking, and I know some of you wanted to say a few things at the end, so I will be glad to share my minutes with you, so you may address his question or any other thing you would like to say. Nothing? Okay. Thank you again for allowing us. Can you guys see me or hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I apologize. All right. Well, again, thank you for your testimony. I will do everything in my power to make sure you guys are not forgotten in your families as we move forward. And as I said earlier, I'm just so sorry for what you have gone through, and maybe we do everything we can so another family doesn't have to have this happen to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I too would like to thank this panel for sharing your very difficult stories, certainly on behalf of the Senate and the members of the Assembly that are on these committees and not here today and also present. We're so sorry for your loss. Clearly, communications is a problem, accountability is a problem, among other things. And I hope that you do get the feeling that we are very sincere in our efforts to bring this information forward and to ultimately do something about it. But we do appreciate the fact that you were all here a little earlier. Dory Carlone held up a pin in memory of her mother that she did ask me to wear, and I do. It's Mom's Lives Matter, but of course it takes in everybody's loved one, whether it's a mom, a dad, an aunt, an uncle, whatever it might be. And I'd encourage all of you to please keep up your advocacy, as difficult as it might be in our search to get answers. It does help. And you're all, of course, invited to stay on and watch as we move through the rest of the hearing. So we will now move to our next panel, which consists of Tracy Alvino, Danielle Messina, Melissa and Irma Keeler, and we would ask that you present in that particular order. Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Tracy will be up first. There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to be my father's voice. And I wanted to express my condolences to all of the other witnesses. The truth is, none of us should be here today. My father's death, along with thousands of others, was preventable. The only reason we are here today is because of the criminally negligent decisions of Governor Andrew Cuomo. My father, Daniel Alvino, was my hero. He was a 76-year-old ball of energy with a huge laugh you could hear a mile away. I mean, you could almost see his laugh. You hear it through the picture, right? I mean, he was a Vietnam-era veteran, and he taught me to love and respect my country from an early age by teaching me to salute the graves of soldiers as we drove past the military cemetery. My dad loved his family more than anything and took great pride in throwing big family parties with lots of desserts, at least 2 per person. One of my favorite dad stories is when he bought sports equipment for children on his football team that he coached because their families could not afford it. He loved football. It was his life. And he had just retired from being a Section 11 football referee for 35 years because he had some orthopedic issues, which led him into surgery on March 11th of this year. My dad needed rehabilitation after his neck surgery. Was admitted to Our Lady of Consolation Nursing Home and Rehabilitation Center in West Islip on March 19th. We had issues from this facility right from the start. My father, a Vietnam era veteran, was made to sit in his own waste for hours on end. He had a collar around his neck for the surgery. And because of the surgery, he was in great pain using his hands and needed help to eat. His aide would not help him because she said, "You don't help yourself." And he had to eat with his face down in a dish like he was an animal. He didn't even have his teeth brushed for at least 5 days by his count. He would complain to us about blisters on his feet that were killing him, and because of the collar, he couldn't see that he had a deadly cellulitis infection that was caused from neglect, just letting him sit in a wheelchair for days, rotting there. On March 23rd, we were called and we were told that there was COVID in the facility, but the person didn't have symptoms and they were very well isolated and that my father was in no danger. But of course, we immediately wanted to take him out. We were discouraged from doing this because we were told the insurance would not cover his treatment and it would be thousands and thousands of dollars, and we were forced to leave him in. We know now that it wasn't one person. We know it was all over that rehab facility, and that at least 40 people died in the center, not including the people that died in hospitals later on. On March 27th, he told us he was running fevers. When I spoke to his nurse, he downplayed it and flat out lied and said that my dad was not running fevers, but he was because it was in his medical records. My father would hear people coughing profusely and ambulances coming and going, and told me that if we didn't get him out of the facility that I put him in, that he was going to die there. He was released on March 30th. His stay was only 11 days long, and it's amazing what damage was done in those 11 days. When I picked him up, he was in terrible shape. When we got him home, he collapsed on the driveway, complaining of being too tired to make it to the steps. My mother, boyfriend, and brother laid my father down on the driveway and covered him with a blanket. It took my brother and my boyfriend, who is a former Navy SEAL, to drag my father into the house where he couldn't hold his bowels and there was waste all over the place. It was humiliating. On April 1st, he started to run a fever and we had no choice but to call an ambulance. He was diagnosed with COVID on April 2nd and was placed on a ventilator in the early morning hours, and we never saw him again. Upon looking into my father's discharge paperwork from the nursing home, there was a paper buried in an envelope that stated he had COVID symptoms and he was labeled a COVID suspect. The nursing home didn't test him, they didn't treat him, and they didn't tell us that he was a COVID suspect. As you can guess, my mother, my boyfriend, my brother, and I all developed COVID right after. My mother was so sick, I thought she was going to die and I was going to lose both of my parents. But luckily, by the grace of God, she's here. And my brother developed double pneumonia. I now have post-viral syndrome and have neurological symptoms. My father is not counted in the total number of nursing home victims because he died in a hospital on April 14th alone. Thousands of people like him are not counted. We deserve to have an accurate number of victims so that everyone knows the truth and Governor Cuomo can answer for these deaths and not hide behind his flawed statistics while he celebrates himself on his posters. On March 25th, Governor Cuomo signed an executive order to put COVID patients into nursing homes. And we knew as far back as February 17th that COVID was the deadliest to the elderly and immunocompromised. Our own Dr. Anthony Fauci said that in many, many interviews all throughout February. Why then did we spend millions on auxiliary hospitals that didn't see one patient if we weren't going to use them? Did anyone in Cuomo's administration give any sort of pause to this directive that it wasn't a good idea to put these infected patients in with the most vulnerable? Families were kept out of nursing homes so that we didn't accidentally bring the virus in, but Cuomo mandated into the facilities anyway, and we demand to know why. We deserve answers. If he didn't sign that mandate, thousands of people would be alive and well today. And of course, to add insult to injury, I couldn't bury my dad with more than 10 people at his graveside. No church, no priest, no viewing, no anything. But the governor condoned and supported and even encouraged thousands and thousands of protesters all over the streets of New York. As if all of this wasn't enough, Governor Cuomo then sneaks a provision into the New York State budget to absolve nursing homes of blame due to COVID. That's the same as killing somebody by drinking and driving and then passing a law after the fact to make drunk driving illegal for that time period. Us families are being thwarted at every turn to get accountability and justice for our loved ones. Nursing home reform is well past due. There are families out there that come to me that haven't seen their loved ones in 6 months. That's just cruel and unnecessary. None of us ever think that we're going to end up in one of these places, but we don't know what the future holds. This will not be the last pandemic, and I'm here today to make sure this tragedy and all its preventable deaths are not repeated. I humbly request that we do everything in our power to get an independent investigation into Governor Cuomo's actions. We need lasting change to turn nursing homes into sanctuaries where our seniors, who are our national treasures and built this country, will be respected, protected, and treated with the dignity they so rightfully deserve. I thank you again so very much, and it has been my honor to testify for you today.
Thanks, Tracy. Danielle Messina.
Hi, can you hear me?
There we go. Yes.
Okay, good morning. I just want to send my condolences to all the families as well, and I want to thank the panel for having me speak and tell my story. My story, this is my dad, Samuel Arbini, only 70 years old. My dad, Samuel, was 70 years old. My dad was a bull. He had a tough exterior. Once you pulled back that tough exterior, he had a heart of gold. He was a loving father, a devoted grandfather to his 3 grandsons, and an older brother to 5 siblings. I am forever brokenhearted with no answers, and I want justice. My dad had a fence business for over 40 years, which he took so much pride in his work as he served Staten Island for many years. As tough as my dad was, never in a million years would I have expected him to die this way, where he should have been protected in a nursing home. I'm forever brokenhearted and anguished and infuriated. My dad called me on April 15th, and he didn't sound right. He seemed congested and developed a cough. I asked him if he was okay. Of course, he said he was okay. He told me he was fine. The next day, April 16th at 4:30 p.m., I received a frantic phone call from the nursing home that my father fell twice. They claimed they were too busy to call me the first time in the morning when he fell on the floor. The second time they found him with low oxygen, claimed that he wasn't himself, and at this point he was showing all signs of the virus. They called an ambulance and sent him alone to the hospital. Doctors immediately did a chest x-ray. He stated he clearly had the lungs of a COVID patient. He developed pneumonia, had a fever, so he received a rapid COVID test. He didn't have a voice to speak to him because I was not allowed to be there at the hospital since it was the height of the pandemic. After he was tested, they sent him right back to the nursing home on his regular unit. When I called the nursing home and questioned, why was he put back in his regular room? I was told, we don't know what we're treating him for. 2 days later, test results came back positive. Then he was moved to a COVID floor. That same night, I received a terrible phone call. Come here because your dad's not going to make it through the night. I ran there as I watched my poor daddy suffer terribly. His breathing was very bad. My father was a strong man and he did make it through the night. But sadly, each day his condition got worse. The following Saturday, he was put on hospice because I had to get father, my hero. I had to stand over him
Danielle,
I'm sorry?
oh, there you go. We lost you for just a moment.
Okay, I don't know where I finished. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, you mentioned that your father was your hero, and then we lost you right after that.
Okay, they sent my dad back from the hospital late that night, and he was put on his regular floor. When I questioned why was he put back on his regular floor, the nurse stated, "We don't know what we're treating him for," which that's a lie. He clearly showed every symptom of the virus, and the hospital stated he had the lungs of a COVID patient. With that, he infected his whole floor and the whole unit, just like how he was infected. Governor Cuomo's order that was made official on March 25th was the reason that my father and over 6,000 seniors were tragically taken from us. Governor Cuomo begged over and over for President Trump to send him ventilators and to bring the comfort ship, which he did. As a result of that, COVID positive patients were not sent to the comfort ship or the Javits Center, but instead were sent back from hospitals and nursing homes to infect and kill our loved ones. Only 4 states in the country, New Jersey, California, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, followed Governor Cuomo's order, which is why 1/3 of all coronavirus deaths are from nursing homes in the United States. And if Governor Cuomo was not guilty, why is it a problem to do a proper full investigation? The nursing home stated no COVID when I asked. I also asked, my dad was a dialysis patient. I asked, does my dad get a mask when he goes from the 4th floor down to dialysis? The nurse told me, I have no idea. You'll have to take that up with dialysis. I was called late afternoon on April 16th, and oh no, I'm sorry. I blame Governor Cuomo on his lack of action in preventing the deaths of my dad and thousands of others. His inability and unwillingness to give clear and decisive direction on how to minimize risk, I feel has caused thousands of their lives. My father was anything but a number. His life has mattered. On that following Saturday, after they told me that they found my dad on the floor, the next Saturday, they told me, come here, he's on hospice. Everything was failing. I had to stand there and watch my strong father, only 70 years old, gasp and take his last breaths as I had to stand there and I could not help him. I want answers and investigations, and I want justice. And Governor Cuomo stated on the news clearly how he would not, if you had a family member in nursing, he would down and he would put mother choice.
Danielle, you still there?
Hello?
Okay, we have you now.
Okay, did you lose all of it?
Not all of it. When you saw Governor Cuomo on TV was the last thing that we heard.
Right, and Governor Cuomo clearly stated on the news how he wouldn't put his own mother in a nursing home. Some families had no choice to put their family in a nursing home. I loved my father more than anything. Unfortunately, he had to go there due to some health issues that he overcame 2 years of battling, that he was finally in a good situation. But Governor Cuomo and his order did not protect him, and he had underlying conditions, which he had caught the virus, and he didn't stand a chance. He also protected his brother, protected his brother in the basement, gave his brother hydrochloroquine. Other people didn't have that chance. How do I know that couldn't have worked on my dad? He wasn't given that opportunity. He was sent back to a nursing home to die like a dog alone.
Thank you, Danielle. We're, of course, very sorry for your loss, but thanks for your testimony. Melissa and Irma Keeler.
Good morning. This is Melissa. I'm here to tell the story of my father-in-law, Marvin Keeler. He was a father of 8 children, only 1 daughter, and has 21 grandchildren. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Um,
Take your time.
Marvin was a Putnam Valley resident here in Putnam County, New York. He was a coach for the Putnam Valley Little League and all of his soccer programs. That any adventure that his child wanted to do, he was there to support them. He was also the vice president of the Putnam Valley Volunteer Fire Department. In February of 2012, Marvin suffered a CMA stroke while at work in New Jersey. He was disabled immediately. The shot that they were supposed to give for strokes, he didn't get it in time. After his hospital stay and other rehabilitation stays in 2012, my mother-in-law, Irma, was forced to retire from the school district to become his #1 caregiver. She drove him to outpatient services every single day. He had OT, PT, speech. Now his stroke was in February of 2012. She did such an amazing job. He was able to walk his only daughter down the aisle in April of 2013. In fall of 2018, he developed pneumonia. He was also diagnosed with stage 5 kidney failure. He underwent a hospital stay that then resulted in more nursing home treatments. In August of 2019, he went to the Grand in Pauley, New York, and in February of 2020, the Emerald Peak in Peekskill, New York. He was receiving dialysis 5 days a week, 3-hour treatments a day. It took a lot out of him. Afterwards, he would receive OT and PT therapies. However, if he was sleeping, the nursing home wouldn't wake him up and wouldn't give him his therapies. They refused to take him out of bed or even assist him with eating. They would put his food tray in front of him and walk away. If he was sleeping, they wouldn't wake him. If he was awake, they wouldn't help him cut his food or even feed him. He had slurred speech. He was unable to walk on his own at this point, and his left side of his body was completely paralyzed. So if you only have one hand, you can't cut your food. And March 16th, the Emerald was closed to visitors. Phone calls were being received from Marvin to my mother-in-law requesting us to come into the facility and bring him food. He was starving. He had his own personal cell phone and he was trying to reach out to us as much as possible. The nurses found him on the phone requesting food and started screaming at him. We have recordings of the nurses screaming at patients, talking about forging medical records, and speaking ill of family members on how we don't care about our loved ones and we never visit, which is completely untrue. Our immediate family is over 30 people and we all live in the same town. We are there every single day. We had another friend in the same facility whose father tested positive for COVID. When we inquired the Emerald Peak on how they were keeping other patients safe with a positive patient in the same building, they told us that there were no positive patients, that we were just listening to rumors. They never tested Marvin for COVID. Between the dates of April 8th and April 15th, Marvin's hemoglobin was dropping. He had a slight fever and was refused dialysis treatment. From there, his port got clogged and infected. He went to the hospital to have it unclogged and a new port put in and returned to the nursing home the same day, still not receiving dialysis. The next morning, they went to wake him. He was unresponsive and rushed to the hospital. Finally, the hospital tested him for COVID and he was positive. They returned him to the nursing home for unknown reasons. Nobody can answer why. On April 15th, Marvin was back at the hospital, was tested for COVID again, also had a bacterial infection in his clogged dialysis port. He wasn't properly being washed and cared for, and now the infection was in his bloodstream. Putnam County didn't call us in reference to his COVID testing until after he passed. social workers at the facility were never available to take our phone calls. We were always told that they were in a meeting, not available, or just not in the building. Nurses were not able to help or give us updates. And when they did get on the phone, they were very nasty and almost inconvenienced. I'm sorry, I'm totally losing my place here.
That's okay. You just take your time.
No, we were also, since Marvin's passing on April 15th, we were told by the facility that because they are a private entity, they hold exemptions from the state and county regulations. Families are furious, they feel helpless, and their questions and concerns often fall on deaf ears. The day after we buried Marvin, the facility called for their payment of care. Today is August 17th. He passed 4 months ago. His birthday is Wednesday, and we still don't have his personal belongings from the facility. No one will answer our calls or our emails. I set alarms on my phone to call every day or email the social workers every day. The only thing that they dropped off at my home when I was not there was his fireman jacket. Everything else we have never seen again. I have to say, Sue Sereno, your words spoke to me that these patients, they didn't have a choice and they didn't have a voice, and neither did their families. Unfortunately, this pandemic has hit the nation and left families up in arms. They want to be there for their families. They want to be there for their loved ones. They want to be there holding their hand if they are going to be taking their last breath. Unfortunately, many families never got that opportunity. I would love to see a full investigation, both state and federal wide. I would hate to see another family go through the pain that we all have. My 5-year-old nephew still asks every day, when is Pops coming home? Thank you.
Thank you all for your testimony. Senator Sereno will be up first.
Sorry, I had difficulty with that button.
You're good now.
Okay, thank you. Melissa, I am so sorry to hear about Marvin, and I can't, it's terrible that you never got any answers to any of the questions. Because you did say you never got an answer to the question of why he was returned to the home from the hospital, but who did you reach out to? Was it just the hospital and the home? I didn't know if you ever reached out to the governor's office or the Department of Health about their cases.
We did not reach out to the governor's office. We live in Putnam County. His facility was in Westchester County. We were reaching out to local government offices just for guidance. We didn't know where to go to and where to turn. So at the moment and in the mix of all the chaos, we were trying to put our faith into the doctors at the hospital, and whether or not they had a bed available in the hospital or not, we're not sure. I know he was in ICU for a few days and then he was returned back to the nursing home. Maybe they felt he was stable enough, we're not sure. But even on April 15th, as he was passing, as they were performing CPR, instead of calling and talking to his healthcare proxy, the hospital would call a different family member, someone who's not authorized to say, it's okay, let him pass, or no, keep trying. So I feel like there was just a huge lack of communication, no clear guidance, and unfortunately, just overall miscommunication is pretty much what I can say. We, faith in the healthcare system and faith in hoping that they're taking care of our loved ones when we can't, or we're being forced not to. It's heartbreaking.
No, oh God, Melissa, listening to your story as the other stories too. And, Janice had said it earlier about communication. Everybody has said the same thing. There was no communication, and that's all that you want. So you know what's going on and you have a say in what's happening to your loved ones. So even the hospital and the home, those were the only people that answered any of your questions because you didn't reach out to the, and of course you don't know, when you're in this situation, you don't know who to reach out to.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, and thank you for participating here today. I know it's got to be horrific to be telling these stories. It's heart-wrenching, but it really will help moving forward because it is about taking responsibility, right? We need to know what we need to do. God forbid something like this happens again. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate everything everybody's talking about today. Thank you.
Assembly?
Okay, I'll go on the assembly side for now and use my 5 minutes. I want to thank again each of the witnesses in this panel, Tracy, Danielle, and Melissa. Like Senator Sue Serino, I also represent the town of Putnam Valley, and I've known the Keeler family for many years. I've known Sean, who is a former fire chief in the Putnam Valley Fire Department, and I'm privileged to say that I've actually met Marvin, I believe, at the ambulance corps in the past. And Melissa, my heart goes out, my family's heart goes out to you and your entire family. I even recall Sean reaching out at some point during this nightmare of a year, this trying to get some communication from the nursing home in Westchester County. I believe it was Peekskill at the time. I think you said it was Emerald Peak. And I just want to extend, again, my condolences. It was said before by some of the other witnesses that it's not just the loss, it's not just the lack of answers and information, and that's across the board. I really don't view this as a partisan thing, but it's also just being robbed of that traditional, ability to mourn, having a regular funeral the way we normally would. It really, this has a very large toll on our families and the children. So I want to thank you and just give each of you some more time. I have about 3 minutes left on my end, but that you can each use at your, I'll just defer to you. And I'll ask you again, I think you both said you would favor an investigation, but that would include a potential federal investigation. I mean, CMS and Medicare is federally funded. And or an independent investigation as well. And that would go in addition to what the state's doing, DOH and the Attorney General's office right now, although some of us think that may be a little conflicted since they're essentially investigating themselves, since many of all these nursing facilities are state regulated. So would you use my time as you wish, and if you could just answer that you do support or don't a federal and or independent investigation.
I do 100%.
Yeah, me as well, any and all.
Absolutely. And if I could just use a second of the time, there are other things that we need to see because obviously on their best days, nursing homes, a lot of them are not great places to be. My father, even without COVID, was treated horribly. The families need to have a Bill of Rights because if I was allowed to go into that facility and saw the condition my father was in, he might be alive today. And there, like I said, there are families that haven't seen their loved ones for 6 months because COVID keeps coming, they keep getting, people keep testing positive. So the families need a Bill of Rights. We need a registry of nursing home violations, what these fines are. If now I know after the fact that Our Lady of Consolation had tons of infection control violations. If I knew that, maybe I wouldn't have put him there. So I think that needs to be public knowledge as well. And these nursing homes need incentives to attract better quality employees, ongoing education, better doctor to nurse patient ratios. I mean, hospitals pay more. So a lot of times our loved ones in a very intimate setting are getting cared for by people that are maybe not the best, because the best are going to the hospitals because they pay more. So that's it.
And at the same time, some of those nurses, I mean, I'm a teacher, but some of those nurses do give it their all and some don't. But the fact that there was funds available, there was help available, and they turned it away is heartbreaking. even if it's just to bring in extra hands to answer a phone call and just have that open lines of transparent communication between the patients and the family members. I mean, closing your doors for months at a time, we weren't even able to look at them through the glass windows. And I know my routine was that my children go to religion every Tuesday, and I go and I see my father-in-law with my toddler. And every week I would hold his hand, or I would hold his leg, and I could feel him getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and asking questions. Well, you're here at night. His doctors and nurses aren't available. You'll have to come back in the morning. And it's constantly falling on deaf ears. It's very disheartening. There's no empathy. There's no clear communication. Again, the guidance. And for Marvin to call my mother-in-law and beg her to bring him Chinese or meatballs, things that he normally doesn't eat, but begging her to, over the course of almost 8 years, he's never done this. It wasn't in his character to do this. Those were huge bells and huge red flags for our family. And again, every time we inquired, we were turned away.
Thank you, Melissa. I think I'm out of time, and I don't see anything from the Senate, but we do have colleagues on the Assembly. I'm going to go to our ranker on the Aging Committee, Assemblyman Jake Ashby.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to everyone on this panel for testifying. You have my sincere and heartfelt condolences. Last week during one of our hearings, we heard from the director of Leading Age, and a number of investigations were done by DOH into the nursing homes, and over 1,000 of the state's over 600 nursing homes, and only 4 of them resulted in immediate jeopardy. So that means that the state would have the ability at that point, because of the violations, to pull their ability to bill Medicare and Medicaid. And, based off of the testimony that we've heard thus far, I think there's a number of instances in here that could be added to that list. And so I don't have a question, but it's just more of a comment here, and being so grateful that you're here today providing this testimony and willing to push for an independent and federal investigation into this. I think it's crucial. I think it's crucial to the number of people that are still in nursing homes right now and their families, and to bring justice for everyone who's gone through this. And I just want to say thank you for you all being here today.
Jake, moving on, staying on the Assembly side, we have Assemblyman Michael Riley.
Thank you, Assemblyman Byrne. Thank you to the panel for sharing their stories. Danielle, this is a question for you. I know during your testimony it was a little broken up due to the technical aspect, but I remember hearing your story when you were up in Albany at a rally. I think that you mentioned that your father was sent to the hospital, and the COVID test was negative, and then he was sent back to his regular room in his nursing home. If I misinterpreted that?
You got it partially right. When they found him on the floor, they told me he had low oxygen and he wasn't right, and they sent him to Staten Island North. They did a rapid COVID test that would take 2 days. They sent him back the same night with every symptom of the virus, when the doctor said he clearly had the lungs of a COVID patient, back to the nursing home, back on his regular floor to infect his roommate, all the staff, and all the other residents. And that's how he probably got the virus, because he was on lockdown for 6 weeks. I couldn't see him. Nobody could enter the building. It was either a worker or a COVID positive patient that Cuomo let go back into these facilities to die, to catch the virus and die.
So did anybody from the nursing home speak about an isolated room for suspected COVID patients?
Nope. When I asked her, why would you put my dad back in his regular room? She says, we don't know what we're treating him for. I says, well, that's sad, because he clearly is showing every sign of the virus. And the doctor said it at the hospital. lungs of a COVID patient. I even have a voicemail from him the day before. My dad thought he hung up and he didn't. And it was a 3-minute message. And somebody walks into the room and he's clear. They said, "Oh, are you okay, Sam?" And he's like, "No." He was raspy. He was congested. He was completely articulating and saying every single sign of the virus. He goes, "You don't think I could have the coronavirus, do you?" She totally dismissed him and said, "Oh, don't rack your brains. Don't put it in your head. You'll be fine. Have a nice day." The next day they found him on the floor. He was coherent. He wasn't a dementia patient. He was 70 years old. He was 100% intact. And he clearly was sick as a dog. There's just no words for it.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And
Thank you, Mike.
I know it's very difficult for you and everyone else that's sharing your story. So, but I just want to say thank you for sharing your stories, because it will help all of us. So thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Moving forward to Assemblywoman Missy Miller for 3 minutes.
Again, I'm so sorry for all of your losses. The stories are just heartbreaking, and it's an absolute sin that the governor and our Department of Health won't listen, won't even take the time to hear these testimonies, the real life happenings, what the story really was. It's really upsetting. You guys were talking somewhat about the patient bill of rights and that the families have rights. But so I looked up, just for reference, the patient bill of rights. And from what I can see, there were 2 violations. And the answer will be that, well, it was a pandemic. We had, it was an extraordinary circumstance. Extraordinary circumstances should not give the authority to violate somebody's rights. The first one is communicate with and have access to people and services inside and outside the facility. So if they're denying access to a patient's family, or the person who, like in the other case, comes in and feeds them every day, their family, they're denying their basic rights. And the other is, and this one is really what so many of you are describing, be consulted when the facility sets policies about your rights and responsibilities and about aspects of your life in the facility. So if you're not being consulted, and clearly these patients were not, none of your loved ones were consulted about what was going on, because probably it was chaos. But I think moving forward, there may be a need, maybe we could present some form of legislation that assures that even in a pandemic, or even in, an uncertain situation, people's rights are not violated. And that could prevent, these type of circumstances. This could prevent maybe these deaths. Like we have these rights for a reason. So that's something that I certainly think we need to look into. And thank you again.
Thank you, Missy. The last one I can see with their hand raised is Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis of Staten Island. Floor is yours, Nicole.
Thank you, Kevin. I want to thank all the chairs for putting together this event today so we can hear directly from the families that were impacted. Janice, Dean, it's great to finally hear your testimony, your full story, your full testimony, and thank you for being such a great advocate, as well as all the families. I noticed that we have someone who is from my area in Staten Island, New York, Danielle. Danielle, I want to thank you for testifying today. And I had a question regarding the timing.
Thank you.
So my first question is, what was the date that your father was sent to the hospital?
April 16th at around 5:00 p.m. from Cove Lakes to Staten Island North, alone, and I couldn't be there because it was the height of the pandemic. So,
and he had the symptoms.
Wait for him to call to nursing home. I had to call the nursing home at 11:30 at night and say, "Where is my father?" When they told, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're breaking now, but
Okay.
I guess my second question is, he was tested for the virus.
Correct.
And before they got the results, they sent him back to the nursing home, which
He
would
was
be clear,
right back on his floor on his unit.
and that in itself is a clear violation of any of the governor's orders. But what I found interesting was, on April 7th, the South Beach Psychiatric Center was opened and for full capacity for patients that were COVID positive, and yet your father was never, number one, he should have stayed in the hospital until we knew whether he was positive or negative. He should have been isolated, and he should have been sent if it was found that he was positive, or if anyone else within that nursing home was found to be positive, then they should have been sent to the South Beach Psychiatric Center to be cared for, not to the nursing home.
100%.
And that to me is really what is so problematic, that even after these facilities were set up specifically to take COVID positive patients, they were still being sent back. I mean, you're talking about weeks after that facility was up and running, and yet it was never used to full capacity. So, that is what to me is why we have to find out, and to my colleagues, we need to find out the answers to that question. Why even after the Javits Center, why after South Beach Psychiatric Center, why after the U.S. Navy ship was set up to take individuals, were people still put in? So there's obviously the executive order in itself is a problem, and that's why what this hearing really is mostly focused on. But I think we really need to get to the determination as to what happened subsequent to that. And then the testing issue. Why were we not testing these individuals in the nursing homes? We had long advocated for that, for these staff members and for the residents to be tested, and we were never given that by the Department of Health. And that is the other issue that I find really problematic. So I hope from this, look, I was one of the first to call for an independent federal investigation. I think all signs lead to that. And I hope that our colleagues in the federal level are watching this, and we will share this with them after to ensure that that is exactly what we get. We need to have an independent investigation. I thank everyone who continues to push for that, because Danielle, you certainly need answers. Janice, you deserve answers. Tracy, everyone who's here testifying today deserves at least transparency. What led to that decision making? I mean, do you agree with that, Danielle? Is that what you just want to know?
We deserve that.
We want to know the reason, right?
That. We want answers. Somebody needs to be held accountable.
And I don't know, Tracy or Janice or anyone else that testified would like to add on to that, or else I'm done with my questioning.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're out of
Thank
time.
you, Assemblywoman. If I could note that we have also been joined by Senator Betty Little. Assemblyman?
I'm good. I think we're good on the end. I know we have another panel that we're going to try to move around to accommodate another speaker. And so Mr. Stahl, who has his hand raised, was going to do that a little bit later. And thank you, John, for trying to accommodate us just so we can hear from as many people as possible. The next, we're going to move things around just a little bit so we can hear from Mr. Knabb, Jack Knabb, who's the Columbia County Health Director, and recognize him on his own for 5 minutes for his testimony.
Yes, good afternoon, thanks. Okay.
Muted. There now you're good.
I'm old for this stuff. Jack Knabb from Columbia County, Public Health Director down here. I recognize I have a certain perspective that you make is different from other individuals, although I have to tell you, my staff and I have heard these stories in Columbia County. We have 32. We had 32 deaths in our nursing homes here, and many more people that called complaining about the way they were treated and the way their residents were treated. Just to set the groundwork, we had one of the earliest outbreaks at our Pine Haven facility. 52 residents eventually tested positive. 12 died. We also had 15 staff there who tested positive. We also had one of the largest largest outbreaks, I think, in the state, in the Grand and Volusia. We had 142 residents who tested positive. We had 20 deaths there, along with over 30 staff. So that's the that's where we come from. As I indicated, we've heard a lot of this terribly tragic stories. Of late, I guess I've made I made a lot of noise, or as John Lewis would say, good noise, good trouble, about the Grand and them dumping patients in the hospital when the governor changed the order and they couldn't return them and they had to keep them, about dumping patients who had DNR, DNIs, people who were basically in their last stages of life, who should have been given comfort care. What kind of the tipping point for me was one particular woman who was transported to the hospital unresponsive. She was actively dying, and they sent her to the hospital, and she was dead within the hour in the ED. She never made it out. I questioned why. I questioned the Grand corporate office on a call with them why they would do something like that, and they told me that at the time that I didn't understand DNR DNIs. My mother had a DNR DNI 2 years ago, and I understood that completely. My mother-in-law did back in the spring before all this hit, and I understood that completely. I still feel at this point in time that they were dumping patients to get them out of the facility. 16 out of 20 people that died had DNR, DNIs, and I don't believe that there are reasons for sending people with DNR, DNIs to the hospital. At our Pine Haven facility, only 2 people had DNR, DNIs that were sent to the hospital. That outbreak was a little bit earlier, and both of them had medical conditions that needed to be treated immediately. With that, I will end my comments, and because I have a unique perspective, I guess I'll answer any questions from the local health department that I might be able to answer.
On the assembly side, I see Assemblyman Jake Ashby's hand is raised. Recognize Jake.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, Jack. It's good to see you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. I know that we had spoke earlier this summer about some of the things that were going on in the Grand, and I had written to the Department of Health asking for an investigation, and they had been carrying out some, and ironically enough, they took their time and got back to me last week with some of the findings that they found. And I was a little alarmed that they confirmed that the nursing home did not give notice to families that they had tested positive for COVID, or when they moved them outside of the facility. And I think you had been aware of this, but I also think that raises to the question, I don't believe that they were ever put in immediate jeopardy for that as well. Do you know that to be true?
I don't believe that they were put in jeopardy. The notice on the 35 patients who were moved from Columbia County to Long Island were robocalls. And we received at least 3 calls from people basically saying they called the home to find out how their parents were, only to find out that they've been moved that day to Long Island. So robocalls aren't very effective. Obviously, if somebody's working, whatever, they're not going to get it if you're calling their home phone. But as far as I know, they haven't been held in any jeopardy.
Unbelievable. And have you had any recent communication with the Department of Health regarding the Grand?
Regarding this, no. We have daily communication with the Department of Health.
Right.
Quite often being yelled at by them, but we have daily communication. I will tell you some of the early testimony, there are questions in the earlier testimony. The Attorney General's office is investigating the home. And I've received, I've spent several calls on the phone with some of the investigators. They asked me to send names and numbers of individuals who might be able to offer information to them. And these are children of parents that have died in the home. These are staff, people who are working in the home, staff people who worked in the home and left because they couldn't tolerate the conditions. I've passed all those on, so that I believe that's still ongoing.
Okay. Based off of the Department of Health's involvement and outcomes, and kind of piggybacking off of what Assemblyman Byrne had mentioned earlier and what we were talking about with CMS involvement, because so much of the federal resources go into our nursing home care, do you think that an investigation by CMS is warranted?
I think any investigation is a good investigation. And I think that, I think the other thing is that at a more global scale, the model has to change. When I had my first conversation with the folks at the Grand's corporate office, I asked them how many homes they had. And they said, well, we have 17 properties. Well, that's not what I asked them. I asked them how many homes they had. They don't look at the homes as they look them as properties. There's no local control here. I had a gentleman who was in the Grand who couldn't get out of his room because he tested positive. He wanted to be retested because if he tested negative, he could get out of his room. They kept declining to test him. And I finally tried to get the ombudsman involved here from Columbia County, and it took 10 days for her to get back to me. And by the time that they got back to me, he had harassed them so much they finally retested him. It took almost 3 weeks for this guy to get out of his room when it could have been a lot sooner than that. There is no without local control, without some kind of a local authority, you're going to get these things. And I also would like to add, and this is one of the things I want to make sure I bring up, is there is no regulatory compulsion for them to test. They don't have to test. We were lucky in Pine Haven because we had a medical director in Pine Haven that wanted to test. It was hard for us to get him test kits. This was back in late March. We pressed the state for him. We finally used kits that we have here for other viral conditions and gave them to him. We had 16 left. We gave them to him. When we were able to show that 12 out of the 16 tests came back positive, we finally got a few test kits from the state. But we had to harass a couple of the other homes in the county. Luckily, they don't have an issue. Barnwell was slow to get around the test. And I called Barnwell. I'm sorry. I'm a local guy. It was been Barnwell for decades. The Grand was slow to get around the test. And at one point in time, the local hospital, when it was clear they had a major outbreak, the local hospital offered to send in a doctor and a nurse to help test. They readily accepted it, and they sent them down a wing that had been tested the week before. They didn't want them to go to other residents and test other residents because they were afraid of the results.
Was that Columbia Memorial Hospital?
Yes.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Ashby. I think we
really
have to-
appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Ashby. Over to the Senate.
Senator O'Mara.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Jack, for your testimony here today. Just to be clear, is it your impression that at times you were seeing nursing homes sending patients to the hospitals so that they would not have those statistics on their record? Is that what your impression was?
Yes. At one point we had, I believe that with the Grand, we had 12 residents, we had recorded 12 residents had died early on in the outbreak in that home. They had reported to the state they had one. And, they just didn't want it on. And again, from a business point of view, it's a public relations issue. If you have people dying in your facility, if you have people dying in the hospital, it becomes a different thing for you from a public relations. And I know that's kind of looking at this as just a corporate, corporate decisions about things, but 16 out of 20 residents with DNR, DNIs, there are a handful of medical reasons to send DNR, DNIs to the hospital. But why would you send a person who is near death, unresponsive to the hospital? I don't have an answer for that. And the only I did give the corporate folks an opportunity to respond to that. And the only thing they said to that was, you just don't understand DNR, DNIs. Well, they didn't educate me either. So.
Yeah. Do you have any rough idea in your head of how many of those occurred in Columbia County where you are?
I'm sorry, how many occurred in Columbia County?
How many nursing home patients that ultimately died in the hospitals rather than the nursing home? 32
in Columbia County, 20 at the Grand and 12 at Pine Haven.
Okay.
No, those are nursing home residents. Those are not deaths in the nursing homes. I believe I think the Grand is still holding that they only had 2 and Pine Haven had 4 in the homes. And there was also a discrepancy. The New York State Health Department says we have 49 COVID-related deaths in the county, Columbia County. We record 37. Our thinking is the discrepancy is individuals who have died in the nursing home that we weren't notified about. So if they go to the hospital, we typically get notification, and we did get a few that were notified. We think that the discrepancy is, so we think the number for the Grand, it might be larger at this point, but there are people that died in the home that we haven't, the death certificates do come our way eventually, but they don't come our way that quickly.
Yeah. In your experience, and you're keeping track of statistics like this in your job, correct? How difficult is it to tease out the information of nursing home residents that ultimately died in the hospital from, I mean, what in the records are available to you or to us to be looking at to be able to make that determination? And is it that big of a job for the New York State Department of Health to be able to get this figure straightened out?
Well, I will tell you that the DNR, DNI information that comes our way through HICSD, Health Information Exchange New York. This is a system that ultimately they would like all of us in, so that if we go vacationing in Montana and we, fall down a ravine, they can look on HICSD and find out what our medications are and things like that. We're able to go into HICSD and find this information out. With Columbia County and our relationship with Columbia Memorial Health, we get 100% cooperation from them in terms of notifying us of individuals who have died in the hospital who are nursing home patients. We have pretty good relationships with hospitals like Albany Med and St. Pete's. I feel fairly confident about that information, that they share that with us. And otherwise, we can go on HICSD and we can learn a lot on HICSD.
Yes, and you mentioned earlier there is a little bit of a lag time in certain cases of what will show up later. Give us an estimate of what kind of lag time is somewhat normal for being able to make those connections.
Well, it's the lag time is the death certificates. If somebody dies in the home, it might be 3 months before those death certificates come down to play. So a lot of it we're not getting that information. And I think that if you look at data on the state on anything on the State Department of Health's website, they're a year and a half behind, and that's the reason why they're a year and a half behind because all this stuff has to catch up. Will we eventually have an accurate number of deaths for Columbia County? I think so. We're up to our eyeballs in alligators here, so COVID is taking over our life. There's a lot of statistics we'd love to track that we don't have the time to do because we're getting positives every day and we're doing all that contact tracing.
And I certainly understand that, and thank you for the focus on those that are still living and doing that important work. Obviously, that's the priority at the time. But I'm just trying to get some sense of when we think we might be able to accurately be able to put all these numbers together. And I certainly don't expect it to be overnight, but I do think that the state should be making an effort to get accurate information out to everybody, the public at large, the families that have lost loved ones either in a nursing facility or in the hospital having been transferred there. So I certainly appreciate that. I thank you for testifying here today, Jack, and have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, on the Assembly side, we have the Ranking Member Brian Mengtolo.
Thank you, Kevin. Jack, just a question back on the robocalls. Can you explain the robocalls to me one more time?
Well, the robocall is just something that the home can set up, and like any other entity can set up. Is they just put a bunch of phone numbers, and contact information into a system, and then they just have one message, and it's just broadcast out. It's blasted out. So these calls are calling, leaving answering machines, messages on answering machines or whatever. I recognize. I mean, the Grand is our biggest facility in the county at 236 beds. I recognize that's a lot of beds, but something like this, moving your mother, your father, 160 miles away should be something that somebody personally should hear about, not through a robocall. And a
Yeah,
lot
that
of
was-
people reported they never got the message.
That was my next question. So there's no policy in place that you have to make contact with a family member before you move the resident?
Again, I don't think there's that level of control by any entity, and that's why I say that there needs to be more local control over these things, because it makes sense to all of us that this is the right thing to do, but there isn't anything that requires that it happen.
Is that something you think that we need to do
Yes,
stateside?
yes.
I've listened to these testimonies and these hearings for the last week and a half, and again and again and again, the residents and their families need to be part of the equation, and they're not. And that's one thing I'm going to try to push. We need to do something to make the family part of the whole healthcare system, the whole healthcare policy, the whole thing to do with the residents. So thank you for your testimony, and may you get your answers. Thank you.
Senate?
Senator Susurino.
Thank you, Senator Gallivan. And Jack, thank you so much for your testimony today. Where I live in Dutchess County, our local health department hosted a regular call with the nursing homes and the residential healthcare facilities to hear what issues they were experiencing. It was really beneficial, and to see where they could assist. There was a lot of talk throughout the pandemic about the HERD survey. Do you know if your county ever had access to the HERD survey results?
Yeah, the herd survey goes out typically at the beginning of an outbreak. There's no real requirement for like a regular update, and we took a look at the herd survey, and we had a laugh about it, because that was where we had 12 deaths recorded already, and they had 1 reported. There was a big discrepancy between us and them in terms of just the number of people in the facility who were positive. And they were claiming that our numbers were exaggerated, and we had a line list. A line list is just a list of people that were positive and the dates that their tests came back. And we showed the line list to the facility, and they really they had a problem with math, because they couldn't add up the pages. And again, at that point, I think we were up to 125, and they were reporting 90. And they said, your numbers are wrong. No, these are all, there's a name attached to each of these numbers on this list. That's how it works. But the HERD survey survey needs to be updated more frequently if it's going to be useful.
And that's what we heard from different professional organizations too, that, True has to be updated, and the information could be useful to everybody for a response. And then one of the biggest issues we heard over the last hearings was a lack of the access to the PPE, but neither the Department of Health or anyone else could answer our questions about how the PPE was distributed. As a county health director, do you have any insight into how the PPE was distributed to these facilities? And it's actually just speaking to your own experience. Well,
the PPE that was available came down through the Office of Emergency Management. That was another county department. We had stockpiles of masks here that were expired, N95s that were expired. It took us a while, but we finally got permission from the state health department and CDC to distribute them, and we pushed them all out to the nursing homes as best we could, just to move them out. The only thing about expired masks is sometimes the elastic lets go, but they still were useful. So the PPE, and it was a problem. It was an issue. People using the same mask over and over again. Gowns, something simple like a gown, which is very protective. They couldn't. They were using garbage bags. I mean, it's just wrong, flat out. But the state was handing those down through the Office of Emergency Management, and then at some point they said, we're not doing it anymore.
And that we heard, I heard personally from a lot of my nursing home facilities, that was a huge issue, and they needed it more than anybody. But, when you think about that with the vulnerable population, and then the other question that I have for you too, is that the governor has told us time and again that there were COVID only facilities in the state, but hasn't said where. He said nursing homes only needed to call the state and ask for help to get someone to one of them. Are you aware of any of these facilities in your region, or do you know anyone that tried to actually do that?
None in our region. I had heard that there was one out in the central part of the state, and I'm not aware of anybody who tried to send anybody out there.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack, for your testimony today. Thank you.
Assembly?
I thought I saw some hands raised before from Mr. Solka. I'm not sure if I see it anymore. Mr. Solka, are you good? Or did you have a question as well? Oh, there it is. So we'll recognize Assemblyman John Solka.
Actually, I just wanted to follow up on Assemblyman Mankalow's question. I know that DNRs and DNIs that were sent to the hospitals, a lot of times there are proxies that are on that paperwork. Were any of these proxies even contacted? I mean, there's a legal obligation to do that. Do you know if any of them were contacted at all before these residents were moved to a higher level of facility?
I don't know the answer to that, and you're quite correct in terms of the legalities of it. It's just a level that we, with all of the craziness that this pandemic has brought, especially during that crazy time in May and June when the Grand was going crazy, we just couldn't dig that deeply. We're aware of one instance where, and that was in our Pine Haven facility, where the family were very anxious about their father, and they pulled him out of the home. And he had a DNR, DNI. They pulled him out of the home and they put him in the hospital, and he died the next day. But they overruled the DNR, DNI. So I can't answer that question. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, we're going to find out.
I appreciate that, actually.
We have no additional questions from the Senate. Any more from the Assembly?
None. I'll just thank Mr. Nab for being here. Mab, sorry, for being here. I know you have a busy schedule. I just want to thank you for your time, as well as the testimony from everyone else we've heard so far. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
How can you circumvent? Right. How can you circumvent that?
Our next, trying to pull up our next panel, or our last panel, unless I'm mistaken, is Alexa Rivera, Haiti Pabi, I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name, Dawn Best, and Joanne Miles Thomas. And we'll start with Alexa Rivera.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start by thanking all of you for taking the time out to listen to my mother's story. We desperately need your help and support in order to make change for the future. First off, my name is Alexa Rivera, and I am co-founder of a Facebook group called Voices for Seniors, a group that was started by my sister and I in our grief, looking for others that were possibly going through the same situation, just trying to get answers. I lost my mother on April 1st of this year after what was supposed to be a short stay at Our Lady of Consolation in West Islip Nursing Home Rehabilitation Facility. The chain of events that ultimately led to the unexpected death of my mother could have been avoided, as COVID is not necessarily a death sentence. My mother ended up being trapped at this facility because we could not get her sufficient hours approved for a home aid, and we were in the process of an appeal when the lockdown took place. The lockdown at this facility was on 3/11. By March 23rd, my mother was already showing signs of COVID, telling us she had fever, body aches, and diarrhea. My sister and I called constantly to get answers, all downplayed by the staff. We were told she had no fever, and the only call I received from the facility was to tell me that my mother was homesick, nothing of her deteriorating health. On March 26th, we got a call that they were going to discharge my mother. And on that day, my mother was still clearly sick, and the staff continued to tell us that she was okay. Next day, she was no longer able to speak to us, yet they were set to discharge her on March 30th. After countless calls, I spoke to the medical director of that facility, who also downplayed her condition, saying that she was showing some signs of a respiratory issue and that he would send my mother home with an oxygen tank, of which I adamantly did not agree with. My sister and I continued to call until they told us they would take her to the hospital. Subsequently, later on that evening, my mother had a collapsed lung and she was intubated. Within the next day or so, she started to have kidney failure and passed away on April 1st. There's clearly something wrong when we live in a society where we have stricter policies for animal abuse, animal neglect, than the lives of the elderly. Not only was this location not prepared, but then granted immunity by Governor Cuomo, making it easier for the staff to do the minimum and not be held accountable, leaving thousands of families heartbroken. The profits of these private equities cannot come before the lives of our older generations who have paved the way for all of us. The governor seems to forget that we are his constituents. He works for us, not the private equity firms. As people grow old and regress back to being just like children, needing help with everything from getting dressed to making meals, paying their bills, how is this such a disconnect that almost 6,000 people died? Had 6,000 plus children died in less than 5 months, the world would be in an uproar. But our elderly, the most vulnerable, were left to die alone without their families, to not be able to advocate on their behalf, but no one to hold their hands and let them know things were going to be okay, or keep them company in the last moments of their lives. Puerto Ricans have a saying that says, defiende lo tuyo, which means defend yours. And I am here to defend my mother's legacy and memory. My sister and I will not stop. We'll continue to work hard to not only keep raising awareness on the systematic failure that needs long overdue reform. My mother's name was Ana Celia Martinez. She was essential to our family. She was loved by many people, and she is missed dearly. This is a picture of my mom picking apples with my sister and her children. And we just want more transparency. We want accountability. These nursing homes cannot continue to leave people to die neglected, not just during a pandemic, but in general, which we have learned in our group by many people that have given us testimonies of their families who have been neglected way before this pandemic started. Again, I thank you and I appreciate your time, and we desperately need your support to make change.
Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you.
Next in this panel, we have Haiti. Haiti or- Yes. Yes. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for convening this forum, and my condolences to all the families affected. My mother, Elba Pabe, was 72 years old. This is a picture of her. And she lived at the Isabella Geriatric Center in New York City. She died on April 6th, along with many of her friends. It was not her time to die. She was in generally good health, and she did not have the COVID underlying risks. She suffered from early signs of dementia. So much went wrong at the Isabella Geriatric Center. They knew the virus was in New York, but they were slow to respond. Infection controls are not new to nursing homes, and they should have already been in place. My sister and I are NYPD detectives, and my brother is a corrections officer. We were first responders on 9/11. We witnessed many tragedies. This one, too, is extremely difficult to process with the vast loss of life. Where is the outrage? More than 100 residents have died at the Isabella Geriatric Center, and they continue dying. In April, they reported 13 deaths. But a news story broke, and it was 98 deaths at that nursing home. As of this date, Department of Health is only reporting 68 deaths. And we know it's more than 100 that have died at that nursing home. Isabella Geriatric Center accepted COVID positive residents from hospitals. They didn't test residents, So they didn't isolate residents, and infection controls were not followed. They didn't have enough PPE. They didn't have enough staff to provide care. I visited my mother all the time. Last time I saw her was March 11th, when the visits were canceled. All the video chats were then canceled. Communication with families was not there. They never picked up the phone when you called. You would have to call over and over until someone picked up the phone. On April 5th, my sister, Ada, called the nursing home to check on my mother. She called the nurse's station. The nurse said, "Your father is fine." My sister said, "What are you talking about? I'm calling about my mother, Elba Pabe. She is a female." The nurse was upset and finally said, "Your mother is fine. Her breathing is good, very nonchalant." Less than 24 hours later, we get a phone call from the doctor who said, "Your mother is not doing well. She's not going to make it." What happened in those less than 24 hours? At no point did Isabella tell us that she was showing symptoms or was ever ill. I rushed over to the nursing home and they didn't want to let me in. I was denied entry, but I made my way in with EMS personnel that was responding. I went to my mother's room. She was unconscious. She couldn't breathe, was having trouble breathing. She had an oxygen tube in her nose, and the tubes were running and dragging on the floor. Trying to hold myself together, I told her many times how much I loved her and how she was the best mother in the world. Although unconscious, her eyes flinched when I told her those words. Meanwhile, her roommate was coming in and out of the room without a mask. At this time, my brother and sister were downstairs crying hysterically because they're not allowed into the building by the director of social work. My sister, who is a crime scene investigator who had all her PPE, yet was denied the ability to go and say goodbye to our mother. Their worlds shattered at that moment, and their grief is unbearable. Shortly thereafter, without any sympathy, I was kicked out of my mother's room and escorted out of the building without explanation. My mother died 6 hours later, alone. We could not have a proper funeral or mourn her in a dignified manner. The loss of our mother has hit us hard, and our days are filled with grief and sleepless nights. Then we learn about Governor Cuomo's March 25th order and the immunity he gave to nursing homes. This is a death sentence to seniors, and he knew it. And issuing immunity to nursing homes is a slap in the face of families. What I also don't understand is the immunity on record keeping. How are family members supposed to know what happened to their family members days before they died if there's relaxation on record keeping? Looking over my mother's medical records, there are days of blank entries where there should be some. And also in the feeding entries, there are days of blank feeding entries that tell me she wasn't fed breakfast, lunch. My fear is that residents were isolated, unable to feed themselves, going hungry, and dying. Immunity provides no obligation for nursing homes to provide a standard level of care or spend additional money on staff or PPE if it's not required of them, and there would be no repercussions. You need to repeal the immunity clause retroactively. We need to reform to protect our seniors. We need to know the actual number of nursing home residents who died in the hospital. I don't understand how these figures are not in Commissioner Sucker's fingertips. We need an independent federal investigation. We need to let families in now to look over their loved ones. We need accountability. Nursing homes should be held accountable, along with Governor Cuomo, who should take responsibility for the 6,600 and more seniors who died under his reign. I want to thank the Voices for Seniors Face Group for creating this platform for families to share in their grief and bring consolation to others. Thank you.
Thank you, Haiti. Next, we have Dawn Best. Is Dawn on?
Hi.
Hi, Dawn.
Hi, am I on?
Floor is yours. Yep, you are
Hi.
on. Floor is
Hi,
yours.
good. Okay, hi, my name is Dawn Best, and I would like to take a moment to tell you about my mother and what her life was like in the nursing home prior to Governor Cuomo locking the family members out and sending the positive COVID patients in. My mom was 83 years old. This is my mom. She broke her hip in August and was lucky to be placed in one of the better nursing homes on Long Island. She was doing well there. She was always underweight and had actually gained 20 pounds in a matter of months. We were thrilled. She was placed with a new roommate named Molly. Molly was 99 years old and as cute as a button. Molly would tell my mom, "I love you from the bottom of my heart." And my mom would reply, "I love you too, Molly." They were both happy, healthy, and well cared for. Then in March, we were told we could no longer visit our mom. Visits were stopped to protect the residents. I felt bad that I couldn't visit, but I was very happy that steps were being taken to protect her, or so I thought. We Skyped once a week for 15 minutes. She was always so surprised when the screen came on and there I was. She'd say, "Oh, it's Dawn," and I'd see her in the bed and we would laugh and tell stories until the last one. Then a week later, on March 25th, we were told that the state mandated that nursing homes admit positive COVID-19 patients. I was shocked. It didn't take a genius to figure out what happened next. The residents started dropping like flies, bodies were piling up. My last Skype session with my mom was on April 17th, 3 weeks after Cuomo's directive. The screen went on. My mom looked awful. She was laying in bed. She was delirious. Her eyes were closed and she kept moaning, "No, no, no." I yelled, "What is wrong with my mother? Get the doctor." The girl pointed out that all her drinks were unopened and that she may be dehydrated. The doctor called a few hours later. She had a frantic tone and I will never forget what she said. She said, "The COVID is everywhere. It's in every unit. The doctors have it, the nurses have it, and your mother may have it." I couldn't believe my ears. I called many times that night and the next day and was never able to speak to my mother again. On Sunday, I got the call that my mother had died. Make no mistake, she was fine, she was healthy, and she was well taken care of until Governor Cuomo unleashed an unimaginable horror on the most vulnerable amongst us. He did nothing to protect them, sending the ship back empty and not utilizing the Jacob Javits Center. His actions show a sick indifference to human life and need to be investigated. The anguish my family was forced to endure, and all the families, didn't end with my mother's death. We now had to make her arrangements. The funeral director told me we needed to pick her body up as soon as possible since the nursing home morgues were filled to capacity. I wonder why. He said that they were actually temporarily burying people on Hart Island. Temporary burials sounds like a horror movie. He said that once my mother's body was picked up, he would spray it with disinfectant and seal the coffin. What was I hearing? I asked him where I could drop off the clothes for my mother to be buried in. He said it wouldn't be possible to dress her, but maybe he can lay the clothes on top of her. Thank you, Governor Cuomo. I wonder if his directive killed my mother's adorable roommate, Molly, also. Probably. We need an independent, nonpartisan federal investigation so that Governor Cuomo can be held accountable for his actions. The sham hearings of the Democrats investing the Democrats was a complete joke. Mr. Zucker refuses to give us the correct number of nursing home fatalities because he knows that we will find out that half of the fatalities in New York State were nursing home residents that died because of Mario Cuomo's directive. Governor Cuomo has blamed everyone but himself, including God and Mother Nature. He needs to look in the mirror. Where is your remorse? Why didn't you do anything to protect the most vulnerable amongst us? Mr. Zucker didn't even show up for the second hearing. Mr. Zucker, what is the correct number of nursing home fatalities in New York State? He will never release the correct number, I am sure. My mother always said, numbers don't lie, but liars can figure. We need a federal investigation immediately. Our families deserve justice. I'd like to end with Governor Cuomo himself stating on March 29th, 4 days after he sent the COVID in, that he knew the virus preyed on seniors. Here he is.
This virus preys on the vulnerable, it preys on seniors, it preys on people with compromised immune systems and underlying illnesses. And coronavirus in a nursing home can be like fire through dry grass.
Governor Cuomo knew what would happen. He sent the COVID patients into the nursing home. He knew what would happen to the nursing homes when he sent the positive COVID patients in, and he did it anyway. His action showed a reckless disregard of consequences, and the consequences were mass fatalities. He is guilty of gross negligence at the very least. Our families deserve justice. I hope we get it and that you can help us, and thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. And our final speaker of this panel is Joanne Miles Thomas.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to show you a picture of my father. I'm here today for my stepfather and my father. This is my father. He's a 33-year veteran that has served our country for 33 years of his life. He guarded our president, President Truman, and fought in the Korean War. He right now is slowly dying from isolation in an assisted living facility. So today I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my father, my stepfather, and all our seniors that are presently in isolation in many of our nursing homes and assisted living facilities. My father and my stepfather are residents of an assisted living facility in Rochester, New York, a facility that does not accept Medicaid or Medicare. It is a private pay facility, so we come under different mandates. We don't qualify for the test kits that are being sent by our administration. We don't qualify for state labs. We have to utilize commercial labs. So COVID-19 has brought a light to what my family and every one of our families that have loved ones in facilities have always known. We, to this day, are still failing our precious seniors. If we do not take this moment to recognize and commit to making the necessary changes to the rules and regulations that mandate these facilities, I assure you, more lives will be lost. I am committed to whatever necessary to ensure that my parents, my dad, and my stepfather do not become one of those statistics. I, for over 10 years, have been visiting my parents twice a day and advocating for their care. Through those years, I have seen the many failings of our system and knew that one day it would cost many lives. Ignorance is not bliss. It is neglect, and our seniors have been neglected long enough. We have been fighting for our parents long before COVID had its name, and you are just awakening to what we and our loved ones have endured for years. We have spent countless hours fighting for changes to rules and regulations that have never served our loved ones. Lives could have been saved if the issues that we have brought forward for years and have screamed and yelled about were addressed, but they went upon deaf ears. Some of those issues that we have been fighting for years are this section, Title Section 487.9, the resident to staff ratio, 1 to 40 residents, 1 aide, 41 to 80 residents, 2 aides, 81 to 150 residents, 3 aides, 151 to 200 residents, 4 aides. That is not humanly possible. And how do we adequately think we can provide infection control and protocols when we have that kind of ratio? Secondly, families have been asking for over and over and time again, cameras, a bill to be passed so that cameras can be allowed in our loved ones' rooms so that when we cannot be there, we can advocate and monitor their care. The 28-day quarantine that we have right now is absurd. We have a staff member that tested positive. It took 8 days for her test result to come back. She worked for those 8 days. The test result came back 8 days later. We were in lockdown for 28 days, but she returned to care for my parents after 14 days. Matter of fact, she even brought my father down to a window visit so I could visit him and gave him a hug and told me to have a nice visit. Well, I still cannot see my parent. New York State Department of Health needs an overhaul.
They tell facilities when they are coming. They only speak to the staff. They don't speak to the residents or the families when we have complaints. And when we have complaints, we get a letter more often than not that says our complaints are unfounded. And if they didn't see it, it just didn't happen. My parents have had numerous medicine errors because facilities are not mandated to utilize electronic medicine dispensing. They utilize paper MARS reports. I have found numerous times aides have initialed MARS reports that they have completed care or passed medicines when they have not. We have filed complaints with the Department of Health. They say they cannot prove the aide did not complete the task or not give the medication when I have pictures to prove that they have not. Most importantly, if we are not allowed in, who is going to advocate for my parents? Who is going to ensure that I will not find my parent again in a pool of urine? Who is going to ensure their care? Who is going to hold their caretakers accountable? We would not treat children this way. Why do we treat our seniors this way? Our seniors, when they have dementia and Alzheimer's, we become their parent. We become their caretaker. They become our child. They need us. I have not lost my parents to COVID, but I am losing my parents from the cruel isolation they are enduring. I have seen their horrible decline and feel totally helpless. I pray God walks with them while we are away, and I pray you will take up the fight for my family and all the families whose loved ones have and are suffering. We are tired and heartbroken. We've been fighting this fight without you. We need you. My parents need you. My father fought for 33 years for all of us, and he deserves better than this. And think, when you go to bed at night, would you want this for your parent? I thank you for the opportunity today to speak for my parents, and I hope that you pray for them each day that we're away.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming forward and providing your testimony and your stories. And of course, our condolences to you and everybody on this panel. I do not believe that we have any questions from the Senate at this point. Assembly, any?
I don't see any. Oh, I do see a couple of hands raised. I'll go to Assemblyman Jake Ashby.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you to the entire panel for your testimony. It's incredible. I really don't have any words that I think could accurately express how emotionally moving it is. Thank you for these families for their service to our country, to our state. And I'm heartbroken for what you have to endure right now. And our state owes you so much. And I'm confident that all of the legislators in this forum right now are going to fight for that and fight for your families. And I know we all aim for an investigation to happen. And I'm grateful for your support to make that happen as well. And thank you all for coming forward today.
Mr. Ashby. We have ranking member on the Assembly, Brian Mantolo.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. And thank all of you for your testimony and your stuff that you forwarded to me. Just breaks my heart to listen to this, what you guys have to go through. It's terrible. Hey, Heidi, you had talked about where you're at the nursing home, that they were accepting COVID patients.
Yes.
Did you know where they came from? Were
I
they
don't
previous,
know.
were they previous residents or no?
No, I think they came from the hospital. I don't know for sure, but I know the CMS website lists COVID positive admissions.
Do you know how
And
many? You probably don't know how many, correct?
I don't, and I know I put in a FOIL request to DOH, but have yet to hear back from them.
If you don't hear back from them, please let us know. Because as Assemblyman Asprey said, we're here to fight for you. We're here to make sure your rights are taken care of as well.
Thank
And I
you.
know everyone else on this panel will do so. It's just absolutely disgusting that you guys were treated this way as well as your family members. Just, there's no reason, there's no call for that. So thank you for your story and thank you for your service.
And if I can say, CMS had issued a guideline on March 13th that told nursing homes in end-of-life situations, family members should be allowed end-of-life compassionate visit. And we were denied, my sister and brother were denied that visit. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Dawn, also you talked about taking patients in at the facility as well. Were they previous residents or were they new residents?
I'm not certain, I'm not certain where they came from, but I do think it's very clear that it was a very simple recipe that Governor Cuomo put into effect. And my mom went, I hear a lot of people, as I was shocked because I didn't realize this, a lot of the nursing homes, even with all the protections put in place from the new laws, they, a lot of the people were being neglected even prior to this, and it just got worse. My mother's nursing home was very well run, and she went in a matter of 3 weeks from being healthy and fine to dying from neglect and dehydration. That's what she died from. It was a very simple recipe that Governor Cuomo, it's 4 ingredients. I would just like to say the simple recipe, if you would allow me. I call it the recipe for disaster. Ingredient number 1. First ingredient, you lock out the families and the ombudsman so no one knows if the residents are being neglected. Second ingredient, you sneak legislation into an unrelated bill, giving nursing homes immunity if the residents are being neglected. Third ingredient, you do not provide the nursing homes with PPE equipment to protect the residents. And of course, the last ingredient, you send in the COVID patients. I don't know where they came from, but he took them in. He forced the nursing homes. The nursing homes begged him. They told them they did not have the proper equipment, the staffing. They told him what was going to happen. He admitted what was going to happen. He knew it. We need an independent federal investigation. And I thank you all for giving us this opportunity because it's so important. It's so important. It's terrible what he did. It's absolutely terrible.
And this was a private home, I'm assuming, private pay?
Well, they had private paid residents, but my mom just, she was in private pay.
All right. All right, I'm just so sorry again, but
Thank
thank you. for
you.
your testimony.
Thank you, I
Joanne,
appreciate it.
You're welcome. Joanne, one quick question. My district is just east of Rochester, Joanne, and your family or your father and stepfather are both up in Rochester, is that correct?
They are
And your father was a veteran?
33 years.
Well, thank him for his service, absolutely, thank you.
I will.
Let's you and I get together sometime here in the next few days. I'd like to talk to you one-on-one. I don't want to do it here to take everyone's time up, but see if I can do something to help you there, okay?
Sure, I appreciate it.
I would love
Thank
to
you.
do that for your father.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
We do have a few more members of the assembly with questions. If there's still none from the Senate, we'll go on to Assemblywoman Marjorie Burns, who has her hand raised.
Thank you. I just kind of, Dawn, you touched on it a little bit, although in a little bit of a different context than Joanne did. And that was what I'm hearing about from so many people, and we've heard it from other witnesses too, the second effect that if it isn't COVID that is attacking and killing parents and loved ones, it's the secondary effect of what nurses have called and told me was failure to thrive. essence, people who have been kept in isolation for so long that they just have given up and they just aren't going to have anything to eat or drink, and they just allow themselves to die from depression. You kind of both touched upon it in a little bit of a different context. And I heard this from a lot from the nurses who are also witnessing it firsthand. To both of you, the question is basically is if nursing homes or hospitals can allow workers to go into rooms, if repairs need to be made, a lot of employees who aren't necessarily health workers go in and out of these facilities all the time, yet relatives, daughters can't. Have you ever thought about the irony and the pain of knowing that other strangers can put PPE on and go into their rooms for a function unrelated to health, but you're kept out? Joanne, let me ask you first.
Yes. I mean, when we started this journey, I was finding out that they were allowing new residents to move in, doing tours of the building, but yet I couldn't go in and be with my stepfather and my father. My stepfather and my father have both lost 7 pounds each over just the past 3 months. Cognitively, they have both declined. And if it wasn't for this lockdown and keeping us out, my parents wouldn't be taking the decline that they're taking. And I fear if it doesn't end soon, I will lose my parents, especially my father. And my father is a strong man that without the adversities that he's gone through in life, I don't think he would have made it this far. But, I see people coming and going, physical therapists going in. They just said that they let somebody come in to cut a resident's cat's nails. But yet I can't go in. And I've said, test me. We test baseball players. We test NFL players. We do that for our athletes, but we don't think our seniors are valuable enough to test their families and allow their families to go in. Families.
And you'd be willing to go in even if you were head to toe with PPE, right?
I think that I would be safer going in with my parents than the people that are caring for them right now. They do not wear N95. They just wear surgical masks. They do not wear robes. They do not wear gloves. So how are we protecting them? And how do we protect our seniors with a cure that's in them? The cure is worse than the disease. Yeah. It's not working.
Dawn, I know you had a little bit different take on it just from your circumstances, but what were your thoughts?
Well, I think it's disgraceful that the families are still being locked out. The family members are part of the care team. Them being locked out and then ombudsman being locked out has a hugely detrimental effect on the health of the seniors. Number one, a lot of them have dementia. They don't understand. All they know is that their family's not visiting. So that's horrible. But number two, the CNAs that are, even in the ladies in my nursing home, they seem to be very nice, most of them, but I know that other people have problems, but they are being watched. Their license can be taken away so easily. Many of them, when you go to nursing homes, you will see them, they're not supposed to do this. They turn around their ID badge so that you don't see their name. And most of them do that. Because if a family member comes in and they hear something or they see something, we're the eyes and ears, we can report that CNA and they can lose their license, like their whole career is gone. So that's a lot of power that residents' families have to protect their families. Plus the CNAs don't have the time, they're just so short-staffed. So we'd sit with our parents for hours and help them eat and dress them and fix their things and make them mentally happy. And now this is cut off. And I don't know if you can see this. This is worth looking at. This is the worst. These two people were so thrilled that they got to visit their mother. That's their mother. You can't even imagine this. There she is, right? So they just got to see her. This is talk about nursing home prison. It's through a gate with like cones. It was like the worst thing I ever saw. this is the best they could do. I mean, it's outrageous, and it's got to stop. I mean, if my mother was alive, I'd be screaming from the hills about that, but he already did her in. And I feel so bad for your dad. He killed the greatest generation, and he was unable to have the military. He probably couldn't even have a funeral, let alone the military funeral that he deserved. And I'm so sorry for that. My friend, same thing happened to her dad the week before my mom died. Horrible. It's horrible what Cuomo did.
The COVID was bad enough. I know everybody else who's listening to this on the Assembly and the Senate agrees with me that we will fight to try to never, ever let this happen to another family. It is just unconscionable what we as a state have allowed to happen. I am so sorry.
It's the senior citizens were not counted. They did not matter to his administration. It's the worst thing. It's horrible. It's unimaginably horrible. If people would just sit for a second and just like really think what happened, you would be crying. It's so horrible. It's so horrible. It's so sad. It's just that you hear our anger, but really, well, I guess you hear my anger. It's under the anger is the sadness of it all. And that's the truth.
It is well-deserved anger. Thank you.
Senator Sue Serino has a question.
There we go. Thank you, Senator Gallivan. And Dawn, and I'm so sorry for everyone's loss, and thank you for telling us your stories today. But you said your mom's nursing home was really well run, but then after COVID hit, your mom died of neglect and dehydration.
3 weeks.
So do you have any insight? Like, was it because of short staffing, or was it because loved ones, ombudsmen weren't there to be like the extra eyes? Or is there another issue that you think that we just don't know about, we're not aware of?
All of the above. When he sent in the COVID positive patients, the nursing homes were not equipped to deal with this. And so even if you have caring people, I got that from I got to know them. And I had CNAs fighting for my mom because they were watching my mother so carefully because she broke her hip and they didn't want her to fall. So for months, they wouldn't even let her go in her room or even go into her bed because they wanted to watch her 24/7 because my mother kept thinking she can get up and walk. So they wanted to protect her from falling. And right smack prior to this pandemic, the CNAs were telling me, Dawn, your mom wants to go in her own room. She asks me, she wants to be in her bed, and I think she'll be okay. And anyway, I had a fight to let them do that because they were worried about liability. Of course, Cuomo took away all the liability, so they stopped worrying about everything. But so she went, so they put her in her room. Now that's completely, so she went from being watched like literally 24/7 to the nursing home being flooded with the patients that they couldn't possibly deal with. So when I saw her on the last Skype session, now I saw my mom the week before, she was great. She wasn't losing weight, she was great. She was the CNA, I can't believe she put the screen on, and this is what I was seeing was, thank God, but it didn't work, didn't help. But anyway, horrible. She told me, my mom had 3 drinks in front of her, and the girl was holding up the drinks, and they were all unopened and untouched because they were just, my thought is they don't have the time to take care of the residents properly because they're overwhelmed. And in the voice of the doctor, that she was frantic. I can't tell you. She was like, she couldn't even stay on the phone with me long. She was just frantic about what was happening. And that's what they knew this was going to happen. The nursing homes knew that they could, of course they couldn't. They didn't have the PPEs. They didn't have the staff. How can they take care of the residents when you're going to put an infectious disease into their nursing homes? It's beyond the imagination what was done. It really is. I really appreciate you working on it.
Thank you. We're
Thank
not
you.
going to stop.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Back to the assembly.
Yes, we're gonna go back to Mr. Ashby for a second round of questions. Mr. Ashby?
Thank you, Councilman Byrne. Had to come around for a second question here. Katie, you had mentioned something about an order that CMS had given on the 13th of March that allowed end-of-life visits.
Yes.
you know, based on your timeline and experiences that you went through, I mean, you still were unable to visit your father during this time?
It was my mother, and I didn't learn about that CMS guideline until after my mother passed away. Someone brought it to my attention.
Okay. And do you know off of your experience if other residents within the facility, if they were permitted to see loved ones during that time, if they were for end of life visits?
I do know of some other families that were not allowed to say goodbye. That policy, I believe, has since changed. But for us, we were denied.
I'm terribly sorry to hear that. Thank you.
Were there other questions on the Senate side?
No more questions.
Okay, then, oh, we got another question from Assemblyman Salka.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This is just more of a statement than a question. You know, you judge a society by how well it takes care of the unfortunate and how it takes care of our elderly. And unfortunately, we're flunking that miserably. And the coronavirus underscored some of the chronic problems that have been going on in nursing homes for a long time. I spent 32 years in the medical profession. I've worked in skilled nursing facilities. I've worked in a nursing home. And what we saw as far as indifference from some of the staff was very, very disappointing. I'm going to give credit to most of those that work in nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities. They do a great job under incredibly difficult circumstance. But this virus underscores how much work we have left to do. And I hope that there's any positive spin on this, any at all, is that we can count on this group to testify today to help us make the system better. We will, and I can speak in confidence for my conference, we will work tirelessly alongside with you and those that have been affected. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to work hard to make sure questions are answered, and we're going to hold people accountable. And thank you. And so sorry to hear of your losses, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions from the Senate, I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. And I wanted to again thank all of the witnesses on this panel and every panel previously for your comments and your testimony. Haiti, you talked about how the numbers were changed, or like it seemed that they were significantly different from what was initially reported. I believe you used numbers 18 and it was 90, over 98, and then you thought it was 60 and it's got to be over 100. And something you said too that seemed to stand out was that they did not isolate residents. So in your opinion, would it be fair to say that there was a commingling of patients that maybe were either COVID positive or symptomatic of possibly having COVID? Or did I mishear?
Well, definitely. When I went to see my mother on her deathbed, her roommate was coming in and out of the room and she wasn't wearing a face mask. And when the doctor called my sister, he said, your mother is showing symptoms of COVID, but we didn't test her. So if they knew that, they were allowing residents to still wander in and out of their rooms.
Yeah, I just see that as just a major problem. And I fear that it is more widespread than just in that facility. I mean, many of these are state regulated. We have state-run nursing facilities in this state as well, particularly those that serve our veterans. I know that was discussed. I represent a part of Westchester County, and we have facilities in Westchester. I also wanted to bring up one point. I believe you all mentioned that you would support a federal and independent investigation. I believe it was Joanne mentioned something about cameras. This is, I know there's been some restrictions in the past that cited HIPAA and federal laws. And I just wonder, I mean, if we have a federal investigation, there's a lot of things that could come out of that. Maybe it's revisiting some of these other restrictions that come on the federal side, so we can have better communications and access with our seniors. If they need to be isolated, protect, they got to be able to communicate. I mean, even if they're not in nursing homes, we have seniors that are just living at home that are afraid to go out because they've been living in this isolated world for far too long at this point. And it's got a devastating impact on their physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, not being able to go to worship and prayer with their family and friends. So I wanted to point that out. Perhaps that's another benefit that could happen if with a federal investigation. And I want to close with one other question. I said I really didn't want to make this partisan, and we've done a very good job, I believe, trying to do that. But you know, it's been very difficult for me watching the administration's response earlier on. And I believe one of the witnesses, I believe it was Mrs. Dean, brought up New York tough. And I believe the governor got some early credit because he was doing a decent job keeping things apolitical. But as time passed, that certainly seemed to change, in my opinion. I do believe that while the March 25th order may not be the only driver, I don't think it made things better. I do think we need more answers. We haven't gotten a full, accurate count of the deaths that occurred in nursing homes. And what really kind of pushed me over the edge was a little while ago, several weeks ago, maybe even a month ago, the governor's getting in his little tit for tat with the White House. He put out a statement, and I'm just going to read it because I'd like to have your response to this. He likes to talk about facts. Facts clearly demonstrate Trump, the White House, was wrong from day one, and New Yorkers have been right from day one. To me, that is not helpful. I would say New Yorkers, us, you, me, all of us as New Yorkers, sacrificed a great deal to try to help control and flatten the spread of this virus. But to pretend that we did everything right when we've lost more people in this state than any other state in the nation, well over 6,000 people within nursing homes, because we know it's well over 6,500 because we haven't gotten a complete count. But I'd like to see if any of you would be able to respond to that remark, because that is, to me, that was a turning point where things got a little bit far too political, and you can't correct mistakes if you won't at least acknowledge them. But I'd like to get your response to that. And again, just thank you all for your testimony and your time today.
You know what they say, if you say something plenty of times, you'll start to believe it. But he was wrong. How could he think of himself so proud after we've lost 6,600 lives, seniors, and that figure could be more. So there is nothing here to be proud about.
Thank you. Dawn, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you. Governor Cuomo likes to say that this whole thing that we're doing here is just political. But I think he says that because everything to him and all the decisions he made were political. And I think the reason that he did not send anybody to the Jacob Javits Center or the SHIP or other places and decided to send them into nursing homes instead was because he didn't want President Trump to get any credit for sending in the SHIP and doing good. So he refused to use it, and our family members had to pay the price. That's what I think. I think everything with him is political and twisted, and he did a terrible job. He did it the worst. And New York strong, he's a New York coward. There is nothing worse than harming elderly people. There is nothing worse, and that is what he did. Killed them. It's horrible.
I want to thank you all again for your testimony. You're courageous, your willingness to share this testimony, and this will be my last word. There may be other colleagues that have questions or closing remarks, but I just wanted to thank you all. And just the previous panel, I don't like singling any one individual out, but the reality is, Mrs. Dean, I think, did a great deal trying to promote that every voice was heard. So I want to give special thanks to her, your bravery, all of you for speaking today, and just thank you for sharing your story. We're not done listening. We have plenty of work ahead of ourselves, but this is a huge part of our job as legislators, you know, the Attorney General and the Department of Health, they do their own investigation, but as legislators, it's our job to have these hearings so we can ask questions, so we can listen to you, so we can do better jobs. So I just want to thank you all again. And God bless you all.
Thank you.
And I'll rest and turn it back over to the Senate.
Can I say something to what you said about Governor Cuomo's comments?
Sure, Joanne.
I just want to say that when he shows pride in his accomplishments when thousands of lives left, what my father says in his 33 years of service is that there's no pride when lives are lost. There's nothing to be prideful or boastful in that. And as far as New York strong, I don't see it that way. I see my father is New York strong. I see my father is struggling every day to get through this. That's strength. That's courage. Those are our heroes, our seniors, our veterans that gave us the platform that we have today. That's strength and that's courage.
Thank you, Joanne. I'll turn it back over to Senator Gallivan.
Thank you, Assemblymember Burke. We will give, as we conclude, prior to concluding this roundtable, we will afford any member between the Senate and the Assembly who has any additional remarks the opportunity to do so. And we will start with Senator Serino.
Thank you, Senator Gallivan. You know, I cannot thank all of you enough. Your stories, oh my God, are so heart-wrenching and they need to be heard. So the state cannot continue to bury its head in the sand on this issue. I want everyone who testified today and everyone who lost a loved one to know we are not going to stop. We're not going to stop fighting for an independent investigation. We're not going to stop fighting for answers and accountability. And we are not going to stop fighting for real change. Your loved ones cannot have died in vain, and we will keep fighting to make your voices heard. God bless all of them, and thank you again.
Thank you, Senator. Is there any members of the Assembly?
I don't see any, and I'll accept my previous questions and answers as closing remarks for myself. So thank you, Senator Gallivan.
All right. All right. Once again, thank you to everybody who participated today, to the staff who, of course, didn't get a chance to talk, and they're behind the scenes to make this all work. So we're very grateful for your efforts and all the members who gave their time, and most importantly, to all of you who took the time to testify today and to share your stories, as painful as it may be. Unfortunately, it's also necessary. We know that the truth matters and accountability matters, and we haven't seen that in New York State, and our work is cut out for us. But you can be assured that those of us that have been a part of this in our respective conferences, minority conferences in both houses, understand and know what we have to do, and we'll continue to try to be a loud voice to get to that truth and that accountability. And I would encourage all of you to keep speaking up. It can help, and try to get more people on board, because we always talk majority and minority. We're outnumbered when we vote. So we have to be a little bit louder and we have to work a little bit harder, but we can do it. So thank you again. You are able to, I believe, Candace, just shake your head yes or no or thumbs up. This now is memorialized on our Facebook site so that people can go to it and watch it again or pull things out if they had wanted. And then obviously any questions that come forward, concerns that come forward, you can reach out to any of us that you personally know or anybody who may be your representative. But we are very sorry for your loss, very grateful for your willingness to stand up, and we wish you the best. Thank you, everybody.